Good morning, everybody.
Okay, is it a recorded one?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. All right. Good morning, Patty. Good morning, Veronica. How you
Good
doing?
morning.
Good morning. Oh, it's such a beautiful day. I want to go out rollerblading right now. It's like so
Good
nice out.
morning.
Good morning, Deb. How are you?
Good, thank you.
All right, get a couple more people coming in. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Hey, I was having major issues with my microphone in my meeting last night. Does that sound okay?
It's like it sounds a little Charlie Brownish.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think I burned out my microphone. I'm going to dial in.
Oh, okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm going to make you the co-host.
Good morning, Kristen. Good morning,
Good morning,
Tom.
Illyria. How you doing?
Oh, it's been a crazy morning.
It's been a crazy year.
It's been a fun, crazy morning, not a, oh my God, I'm going out of my mind crazy morning. It's been a
Oh,
fun,
that's good.
it's been a fun, crazy morning.
That's good.
I was the
When
first
it's good
one
crazy,
awake,
that's good.
I was the first one awake and I was underneath the kid version of a puppy pile.
Oh my God, that's the best. The best way to wake up. I know, I need a dog. Although I'm gonna have all my granddoggies this weekend and my daughter. Woohoo!
Wow.
Party at the Pelletier house.
Kristen, we don't have any dogs over here. The only things we've got over here are fish and a good 4 to 6 inch long turtle minimum.
Oh yeah, your turtle. How are the little baby turtles? What ended up happening with them?
Actually, we let them loose over at Cruise Lake.
Aw, that's so
We let them
good.
loose. Well, and they were musk turtles. And I had talked with a biologist that is with the Florida Wildlife Commission. And he said, she actually got together with another biologist who works with turtles and frogs. And that biologist said, those are baby musk turtles. They need to be released back to wherever they were found. Well, the problem was where they were found was in the middle of a neighborhood, literally. So we were like, no, we're not going to take that chance. Not when the possibility of cars driving over these guys.
You're so good to do that. I should give you guys an update on my friend Dan, the homeless guy.
In the neighbor's yard.
So Tom, I adopted a homeless guy.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I remember that.
You can do that?
You can do that apparently. No.
Nice.
And so it's not working out too well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, I got him a track phone, you know, I got him some food. I put him up in a motel for a week, got him a bunch of phone numbers to call for resources and assistance. Sam helped me, you know, gather up a list of all sorts of resources for him. And, you know, he's checking out today of the motel room. It's totally trashed. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And he has yet to take a shower. And so I went out and bought him a shower chair because he, you know, he's in a wheelchair. I mean, he can stand up, but not for very long, and he can't really walk. And
Is it the dude
I
across
went and
the
got
street
him
from your
a
office?
shower chair. And I don't think he even ever took a shower the whole that he was in the motel room. So
Wow. Is it
you
the
know, you
guy?
can-
Is
you
it the
can do
guy
whatever,
across
but you
the
can't
street
make
from
him
your
drink.
office?
Huh, Tom?
Is it the guy across the street from your office there by the Walmart?
No, is there a homeless guy over there too?
In a wheelchair, the guy he lives in the woods by the Target, and he panhandles there by the Target entrance.
No way.
Is that him?
Yes.
I don't know about him, but this guy is up in Zephyr Hills, up by like the Panera in Zephyr Hills. Like he hangs out in that parking lot.
Yeah.
So I was going to Panera one day and saw him just laying in the parking lot, all cozy on the concrete, pillow and blanket, shopping cart, wheelchair. And I couldn't bear to just drive by that. So, but you know, here we are. And it's been about a week and a half. And, you know, I did a lot for him, but I'm still going to call it because I think at this point he doesn't need a homeless shelter. He needs an assisted living facility. He's 55, which isn't old. And I'm actually older than he is, but he really can't take care of himself. He really can't. And I don't know, you know, the story he tells, I don't know if he's full of it or, you know what, but anyway, so, you know, I can at least walk away with a clean conscience saying, you know, I try to help him, give him the resources.
No, you did good.
Well, and Sam, you know, did a lot of, you know, legwork last week and, you know, doing the research for resources that are out there. And, you know, I printed out like 3 pages of, you know, agencies and, you know, nonprofits and stuff that can help him with food and shelter and stuff. But his problem is he wants to die and he wants to drink himself into oblivion every day. How he gets money for alcohol and cigarettes, I don't know, but
it's because when he goes to Panera and hangs out there, people at Panera give him money.
Yeah, people. Yeah.
It is.
That's exactly.
Is that Sam?
That's me.
That's Sam.
What's happening?
What's
Good
up?
to see you. You're all grown up now.
I'm grown up now. I know.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
She wants to be like you, Tom.
That's a great question. Ask my bachelor's degree what I want to do because it's not working.
Yeah, me too. Is my audio better now, Kristen?
It is, Tom. Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in no way, shape, or form an expert on helping homeless people, but like you, I have involved myself a little bit with that in the past, and I've walked away with kind of two lessons learned. Lessons learned number one is, of course, being a veteran. A lot of the people I've talked to are also veterans. A lot of them are veterans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I've learned is that, especially for a lot of the veterans, they're very anti-establishment. So they don't, when you say go to this or that establishment, they're like, the establishment's the problem, you know? So they get a lot of them being veterans also are getting money. So they're receiving money from, you know, disability, either Social Security disability or some of them have veteran pay. So at the first of the month, they get a check. And that's where sometimes, unfortunately, it feeds, if there's an addiction problem, the second lesson learned I've had, so the first is many of them are anti-establishment. The second lesson learned I had is that contrary to popular belief, I have not found alcoholism and drug abuse to be the major issue with most of the homeless people I've talked to. It's there. It can be prevalent. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. We know it does.
Yeah.
But not everybody's on the street because they're a drunk. A lot of it's more mental health.
Yeah.
I have had conversations with more multiple personality disorders and schizophrenics and things like that on the street than I probably have people that were half in the bag.
Yeah.
Because when you sober up and you're in pain, sometimes you'll go get help. You want more comfort, but if you're not all there, if you think someone's out to get you, it's a little bit different. And so, you know, they've spent many of them have spent a large portion of their life rejecting help for whatever reason. It's not that someone hasn't come along perhaps and offered it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying though. You know what I mean? I have hope in everyone. All that to say this, you know, I think it's good that you try. I don't believe we should stop trying to reach people. But for me, it's a big calling to have better mental health facilities. If you've ever gone to a mental health facility, especially one that's charity run or it's like lower income, if they're reaching people like homeless people, they're not necessarily places you and I would want to go if we had a mental health issue either.
Right.
And it's nothing against those agencies. They're doing the best they can. But, you know, if you and I had a mental health issue, we'd go sit in some cushy office somewhere, perhaps, or go to some nice hospital. That's not really what they're doing with homeless people. You know what I mean?
know.
Sometimes the best you get is a mattress on a floor somewhere and a doctor who comes in and loads you with meds. It's not pretty. And so I try to find the veteran homeless people and push them to the VA, because a lot of them aren't even registered with the VA.
Wow. And this guy said he was former Marine, but he doesn't have a DD-214.
See, that's that you get that all the time from them, Kristen, is they'll say, yep, I served, but I don't have a DD-214. Well, that means you weren't, so a lot of them were unfortunately maybe dishonorably discharged. They left the military, they dodged back in Vietnam or whatever. The VA will help these guys. They can get registered, but it's they got to show up and they got to go through the process.
And I think that's the
and
problem.
It's hard to get them to do that.
Yeah, you can take them to the river, but you can't make them drink,
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I called like a bunch of places, and there was this one place right in Zephyr Hills that is like right next to Panera that he could easily walk to. And the guy was like, if it's the person I know, if it's the person I think you're talking about, like he already knew who I was talking about. And I'm like, if he already knows, then obviously this guy has been helped before by somebody else with a kind heart, and he just
and when I called the same guy, he's like, did your daughter call last week? I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah. I'm like, do you know who I'm talking about? He goes, I know exactly who you're talking about. He goes, I'm going to tell you now, don't waste your money. Don't waste your own resources when there are resources out there. And he just has to want them. But the problem is, he goes, we are in the business of getting people to a place of self-sustaining. You know what I mean? Like, and he doesn't want it. He doesn't want rules. He doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to do anything. And that's not the business we're in. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense, but he needs something. We can't just let him just.
You want to think that eventually you can get through to somebody. You know what I mean? Everyone has a rational brain. We'll be talking about that today in emotional intelligence. Everyone has a rational brain, and even if it's damaged, we have it. And so you'd think that there must be some way to get through at some point. Actually, one of my favorite organizations, and I can't remember their name now. They're out near Zephyr Hills. They're a little south of Zephyr Hills. It's a faith-based organization, but they don't force you to take part in some of the faith-based things, or some organizations that are faith-based do. They make you attend a church service, whatever. This one is not, but they have it there. But what they actually have they allow you to camp there. So in a sense, it's a homeless camp where they bring you food, water, all that stuff. They have access then to other organizations if you want to get plugged in. But the guy who runs it builds relationships with all these people to help them. Instead of saying, go to this organization, like he knows which organizations they need. He helps broker the conversation as kind of their liaison.
Yeah.
But he lets them camp there and then kind of leaves them alone. So they like it there. So he'll get a lot of people in, especially when it's cold. And they're, you know what I mean? He'll give them, shoes and socks and stuff like that. His only requirement is no drugs and alcohol. Now, they have drugs and alcohol there because it's kind of hard to police that. Right. But that is the requirement. They'll have AA meetings come in, things like that. Yeah. But it's pretty cool. What I found as I talked to the guys there is they're like, we don't feel like anyone's forcing us to do anything. We come here, camp as long as we want. We don't have to attend anything. No one's bothering us. So then they get comfortable, and eventually they start talking to other guys that are there and say, hey, this isn't that bad. This meeting's okay. This organization's okay. So he's gotten a few people to kind of process out of the homeless camps through his homeless camp.
That's great.
He said his goal was like to reach them in the way that they wanted to live by letting them live there. And it's not like Tent City in Pinellas, which is a total prison. But it's kind of a.
Is it tents? Like, do they literally sleep outside in tents and stuff?
They bring their own tent.
Oh my God! You have to remember what the name of that is.
Yeah. My buddy Petey is pretty active with those guys. I've been out there. and spent some time with them before. I'll make a note to send you that, because that would be one. A lot of the guys don't know about it.
I would hook him up with a tent and everything he needs to get out there and stay out there. And then that's what he needs, because he likes social interaction. He really does. And he knows all the businesses up there, and he knows all the employees, and they all know him, and they, throw him a bone, and, and so I can tell he's lonely, and he wants someone to just sit and talk for hours. You know what I mean? And
and these guys will do that. I don't think they force you to register. I'm not sure about that, but I believe you just got to give them a name, and they leave it's private property. So I think it's just like show up, hang out, here's our list of rules, but it's not too harsh. And, but it's been a while since I've been out there.
Okay.
If it's still there.
Yeah. Let me know, and I'll reach out to them and see if this might be a good fit for him. Cool. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for that information. So hi, everybody. Good morning. Happy Thanksgiving week, everybody. Woohoo! Thanks, you guys, for coming into today's workshop. Tom, I've been totally hyping you up for the past month or so. And I'm super excited to have Tom today. Tom is with Stronghold Training. I've known Tom since probably 2014, 2015. And he was with another training company, and I was with the Smart Start Incubator getting my business started. And we met, we connected, he did some amazing workshops, and over the years, he has taught me so much about emotional intelligence. It's hard to have sometimes, especially over the holidays with family, emotional intelligence, and just helping me grow my business in general, goal setting and time management, and all the mentoring he's done for me, helping me get to where I am today. I feel he can definitely bring some things to the table to help you guys move forward. Now, a lot of you guys on this call graduated yesterday. So congratulations. And now the next step is got to hit the ground running and find that next career move. What's that going to be? You know what I mean? Like, what's that next job? So Tom's here today to talk about emotional intelligence. He's going to do 2 workshops. One is emotional intelligence, and the other one is time management, because I think we all need that. How to prioritize things and, put things in the right order. So Thom Perrone of Stronghold Training. This is all my students. I have 70 plus students right now that are broken into 2 groups. I've invited all of them. And so you've definitely got a good chunk of them here live on the call today. And then today's class, just so that you guys know, as usual, we are going to record, and then we'll post that video after today to the Resume Building Google Classroom under the Classwork tab. Scroll down to Professional Development, and all that stuff is Tom. So you got some stuff in there that's Resume Building, that's Camille. You've got LinkedIn stuff, that's also Camille, who's also on this call. So Tom meet Camille, Camille meet Tom. Because you guys both have done a lot of great things for Access Computer Training. And so we'll post Tom's stuff under the professional development section in the Resume Building Google Classroom. So Thom Perrone, this is everybody. Everybody, this is Thom Perrone of Stronghold Training. Thanks, Tom, for being here.
Awesome, my pleasure. Thanks, Kristen. So the stuff we're going to be covering today, emotional intelligence, time management, probably 2 of the biggest issues facing entrepreneurs, employees, just people in general, especially right now. Time management has probably changed a bit since pandemic, but emotional intelligence has become all the more significant. So what we're going to do today is we're going to run through like a 30,000 foot view of this stuff. We're going to fly over it really kind of high level to give you a general understanding of some of the best principles regarding these things. That said, I also want to get very practical with some of this stuff. So I don't want you to just learn about emotional intelligence or about time management. I want you to take some things away that you can actually use. Typically, my emotional intelligence training workshop runs over 6 days, 6 6-hour days. And so we could really get into this if we wanted to. What I've done is kind of boiled it down into to what we can do in less than 2 hours. And again, to give you an idea of this is what emotional intelligence is. So if you ever wanted to explain the science to someone, you could do it, and then give you something that you can actually walk away with so that you leave this more emotionally intelligent than you came in. Same with the time management. We could talk about 1,000 different techniques to better manage your time. What we're going to focus on today is just avoiding overwhelm, how to keep yourself from being completely overwhelmed, and just get really, really practical on things you can do to just organize your life so much easier without getting deep into time blocking and all these engineering project management types of techniques, which can be very overwhelming. We're going to look at just kind of simple things that you can use that really make a tremendous difference for anybody at any point in time. So we're going to start with the emotional intelligence. Before we get all stressed talking about overwhelm, let's talk about emotional intelligence. And the way I'm going to do this is every hour or less, we will stop and take a pretty significant break. So it's just for me to talk at you for 4 hours, I can't handle that, let alone you handle that. So we'll go to like 10 o'clock, and then we'll take a good 5-10 minute break, and then we'll go another 45 minutes or so and take another 5-10 minute break. I'll also allow opportunity for you guys to have some conversation in this. So probably right at the tail end of the break, or before we go on break, or right after break, we'll open it up for a few minutes of Q&A. If you have questions as we're going along, but don't want to interrupt the presentation or whatever, I understand, just put it into the chat. Jump into the chat down there, type in a question, and when I pause, I'll get in there. Ideally, we'll make this somewhat interactive. I'm going to be asking you some questions as we go, having you do some work as we go. I know some of you may be listening in the background, others may be totally dialed in. I'd encourage you to be dialed in. So those of you who really are paying attention, I'm going to give you some things you can be doing while we do this so you can actually grow. And the more you do that, the more you'll get out of this. And that's kind of just a principle in training, in learning, in life, is that if you involve yourself in the learning, you actually come away better. I have sat through many, many hundreds of hours of lectures, and they've been helpful. But every time I've had to work within the training program and then gone out and trained others on it immediately, it's stuck. So if you feel like you've had a lot of education in life, but it hasn't really stuck, there's nothing wrong with you. It's really probably something more wrong with the way we do education. And this is why I love working with Kristen, because she understands this principle, is that when we're educating, we really need to be involving. It really changes. The adult learning model basically demands it. So if you really want to learn this stuff, get involved this morning. It will help. So I'm going to share a little slide presentation, but I won't be tied to my slides today. Pull this up here. All right, talking emotional intelligence. So let's kick it off with a question here. True or false? Type this into the chat. True or false? People can and sometimes need to eliminate their emotions from their decision making. True or false? Let's see if I can see the chat here. Okay. Don't be influenced by other people's answers. Go ahead. Nope, Kristen, you got to pick one.
Crap. All right.
All right, lots of trues, a couple of falses. Kristen tried to give the answer away. So it's a bit of a trick question, as all fun questions are. So to Kristen's point originally, when she said true and false, true they need to, false they can't. That's really the way it works. And it's just how the question is worded. So it says people can and sometimes need to, but the key word here is eliminate their emotions from their decision making. Most of you that said true, I'm sure you're thinking along the lines of, we really can't make just purely emotionally charged decisions. That's irrational. It's going to put us in a bad place. We can't let emotions guide our decision making. We need to be careful. We got to put our emotions in check. All of that is true. The challenge is, if I were to change this wording here and put people can eliminate their emotions from their decision making, that's absolutely false. So because that false statement is in the question is actually false. But it's true that we sometimes need to filter our emotions from our decision making. And I would go even further and say, be aware and yet not respond to our emotions in our decision making. And this is the root of the science of emotional intelligence, is this idea. This is what we're going to be exploring this morning. If I can get my slides to work. So what is emotional intelligence? Hold on a second. I think I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. All right. What is emotional intelligence? I didn't come up with the fancy word. People much smarter than me did. The book definition of emotional intelligence, usually referred to as EQ, which stands for emotional quotient, EI, EQ, is your ability to recognize and understand emotions both in yourself, but also in others, which is why this is such a cool science. And then it's an ability. So it's not just I recognize it, but it's an ability to actually use that awareness to change relationships, to improve relationships. So that's why emotional intelligence is a leadership science, because it's designed to help you stay cool, calm, collected, and all of that, make good, rational decisions, but also to influence others. And this is where I really get excited about emotional intelligence, because sure, I'd like to be more emotionally intelligent, but really I want to be a better leader. I want to have better influence. I want to be able to improve my relationships with other people that are also struggling with their emotions. I can get all my emotions under control, but if other people are losing it, how can I help them? And I think that's an important part of, to me, it's my favorite part of this science. And on that note, there are 5 components to emotional intelligence. We're going to get into each one of these today. They're listed there for you. By the way, I'm happy to share all these slides with you. If any of you are like frantic note takers, you feel like you haven't learned anything, if you haven't written everything down, I'm happy to share the whole slideshow presentation so you don't have to write these things down. But I do want you to write down the things that jump out at you. Very important you capture those things in a way that you can remember, not just one word, but write down like, hey, this stood out to me, this is what I need to do, is better note-taking than just the information. So go ahead and start planning how you're going to use the information now is the idea there. So if you haven't muted out, make sure you guys mute out. I know this is a Zoom meeting and not a Zoom webinar, so just make sure you mute your microphone until we get into our interaction time. So on that note, here's 5 components. This is the definition. It's very important we say right at the beginning, emotional intelligence is science. This is science. This is biology. Okay, this is anatomy and physiology. This is not, it's mental health only in the sense of it's biological. It's cognitive behavioral therapy only in the sense of it's scientific. What this is not is life coaching necessarily, though it can be used with that. This is not spiritual in nature. Not that it's against those things. I'm a person who comes from that angle, but it's very clear that we separate all of those other schools of thought from emotional intelligence, in that emotional intelligence doesn't try to be more than what it is. It is science, right? It is science. So we're looking at this purely biologically. What can I do to affect my physiology, right? So think of it kind of like physical therapy, right? You get injured and you want to get better. You go to a physical therapist to give you specific exercises that allow you to get some mobility back. This is the idea behind emotional intelligence. It's not like yoga, right? This is something more along the lines of, I have certain biological functions happening, especially in my brain, but my whole central nervous system, hormonally, all this stuff going on. What actions can I take that will put those in more control, give me more control over those things? And that's really the idea behind it. So it interacts with all the other schools of thought very well because it's a component of it, but it doesn't seek to eliminate the other ones. It's just biology. It's important I say that because a lot of times we try to make emotional intelligence more than it really is. And by doing so, you actually lose some of the strengths of it. So there's 5 components. The first one is self-awareness. We have to know where we're at, what's going on with us. Self-awareness is the foundation to all emotional intelligence. If I am not self-aware, then I can't go to the next component, which is self-regulation. So if I'm self-aware, then I can regulate, I can control what's going on. I'm aware of my emotions, I'm aware of the emotions of others, then I can regulate my own emotions, my own reactions, responses. Next, we get into motivation. And this is the one most people get excited about. Emotional intelligence is one of the best approaches to staying motivated. Everyone wants to be motivated. We want more willpower. Well, emotional intelligence is really kind of a key to unlock your willpower. And not only yours, but the motivation of others. So the first 2 components, self-awareness, self-regulation, obviously begin with the word self. They're all about us. But when you get into motivation, it's half about you, but we kind of pass the baton at this point. It's half about you. It's also about motivating others. If I can motivate myself, I can motivate other people. Motivation is contagious. Then there's social skills, which is all about other people and our interaction with them. And then next, empathy, which is all about other people, recognizing the emotions in others. But it all comes back to these first 2, self-awareness and self-regulation. So as you can see, if you're more self-aware of what's going on, if you can regulate what you're doing, if you can stay motivated, if you can motivate others, if you can have empathy in relationships and better social skills through that, you can be a pretty influential person. You can get through a lot. That is really what leadership is. And so that's what the components of emotional intelligence is. What emotional intelligence isn't is eliminating your emotions. It's not becoming non-emotional. A great example of this is this man named Phineas Gage. So Phineas lived back in the 1800s. He was a railroad worker, so he was helping take the rail line out west. And of course, they had to go through the Rocky Mountains. So they couldn't go really around or over the Rockies. So they kind of went through them. And they did that with a lot of dynamite. So they blew holes in the Rocky Mountains. If you've ever taken a train out west, lots of tunnels. And Phineas was a big part of that. So he was a manager of large teams. And they would go out and they would blow these tunnels and put the rail line through it. The way they would do that, TNT, actually, dynamite by itself, is actually not that explosive. It requires a charge to explode. So they would bore these holes in the side of the mountain, and they would pack it full of TNT, and then they would put a little detonator, like a little metal pin, would go into the TNT, but they had to put it deep in the TNT. So they would take this, what Phineas is holding here is a 5-foot iron rod, and they would slowly tap that 5-foot iron rod, pushing the detonator deep into the TNT charge. Well, that was dangerous. That was dangerous because, like I said, the only thing that makes TNT go off is a charge, is a spark, and we're tapping it in with an iron rod. And so it was dangerous. So Phineas, being a great leader, he did the dangerous job. He didn't send in the new hire. He didn't send in the new guy to go and do that. Back in these days, your reputation was everything. So Phineas went and did that himself. He went out there and tapped it in. While he was doing that one day, just like this, had his eye up on it, he's going like this, tapping it in, it went off, which would have normally killed anybody. In Phineas's case, it took that 5-foot iron rod and it blew it through his eye. You can see he's got that eye closed right there. It doesn't have an eye behind that. The 5-foot iron rod went through his eye and out the back of his head. 5-foot iron rod, the one he's holding right there, through his eye and out the back of his head. Phineas lived. This is amazing. It was amazing. It's amazing now. It was amazing then. As a matter of fact, it made national headlines back then. It was national news. Phineas went on tour. People wanted to see him. They wanted to hear his story. It's a big deal. So Phineas was not the same after this incident. He went and got some medical treatment. Of course, they didn't pick him up by a helicopter and fly him to the local hospital. They didn't have that type of medicine. So it was a lot of wait and see, stitch him up, pour some whiskey on his face, whatever they had to do back then. Phineas went back to work. So think about that the next time you want to take a sick day.
Give me your phone. I just want to.
I'm sorry? Someone talking? Okay. Sorry about that. So Phineas goes back to work. He's not the same. And he's not changed because he has some form of post-traumatic stress, although I'm sure he did. But he wasn't the same because of the specific brain damage he received. And the issue Phineas had, and the reason we're talking about him, is Phineas was unable, he could not enable to make decisions. Now, he was able to be emotional. Matter of fact, he was a little bit more emotional than he used to be before. He was able to think through things. He could understand things. If you showed him a blueprint, he would understand it. If you asked him about it, he could recall what he had learned. But he wasn't able to make a decision. So if you said, do you want to wear the blue shirt or the black shirt today? Phineas simply was unable. And he would get really upset about it because he understood what he needed to do, but he simply could not choose. Very, very interesting. And this was well recorded. So some years later, in the 1960s and 70s, there were some neuroscientists, some brain scientists that were working with cancer patients that had the same problem. They could not make decisions. And in their research, they found Phineas and actually was able to examine his skull and piece it back together. And what they found was that the location of the tumors that their patients had were in the same location that Phineas's brain was severed. And what they uncovered was that there is a link in the brain, a physical link in the brain between the emotional part of the brain and the rational part of the brain. And that if these two parts of the brain get severed, decision-making ends. Their conclusion? That you always have an emotional reaction before you have a rational reaction, meaning without emotion, you physically cannot make a decision. And this is huge. This is huge. And it's very, very important that you understand this part of the science, because all of emotional intelligence and much of your life is impacted by this. So we walk around in life thinking, I need to be less emotional so I can decide. And there's some truth to that we're going to uncover. But really, the way your brain works, you cannot make a decision apart from the emotion being present. To sever that link would be to sever all decision making. And this is how it works. Whatever you see, hear, feel, think is a stimulus, comes into your brain. And the first place it goes is to the emotional part of your brain. You always feel before you think. This is radical. We're going to show you why here in a minute. Then you process it, though. It goes through filters. And we've got some filters that are pre-existing there, where some of us have certain hardwired beliefs about things. We've got experiences and things like that, which become a filter. But once it passes through the filter, then we have to interpret what is there. And that's the rational part of the brain. And then that becomes our behavior. And this happens in milliseconds, microseconds, and sometimes over days, weeks, years. We've got slow processes and long processes taking place, but it always began with an emotion. Dr. Travis Bradberry, who wrote the famous book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, probably the easiest read of any emotional intelligence book, said very wisely, we have an emotional reaction to events before we have a rational reaction to events. So when someone tells you to go sleep on it and you go, I don't need to sleep on it. Well, technically, if you went and slept on it for 24 hours, the emotional reaction would be gone and you'd be left with the rational. Now, that said, the minute you think about it again, it can re-stimulate the emotion again, but not as the first response, perhaps, that you experienced. And so what we have here is what's called the long route and the short route. So the emotional stimulus comes in, whether it's a bus about to hit you, or bad news, or good news, or whatever you see on the news comes in, and immediately it goes in to that emotional part of your brain. And your brain filters it. And sometimes the way your brain filters it is it puts it on what's called the short route. It short circuits you straight to the amygdala, which is all hormone. And then you have an immediate response. We see this a lot with people who have had traumatic events happen. So maybe a car accident or something like that, where they literally black out. They don't remember what happened. You can actually become so emotional instantaneously that your brain cuts off the rational part of your brain, which actually cuts off your memories. So you can black out and respond. A great example of this is if you were walking and you were stepping off a curb and you looked up and saw a bus was coming. That's really not the time to be rational. That's not the time to do algebra, right? And say, well, the bus is heading north-northeast at 60 miles an hour, and I'm 100 yards away, and there, boom, you're a pancake. So it's not the time to think through. Your brain knows this. You were created differently than this. So immediately what happens is it puts you back up on the curb. Excuse me one second. I know I got to sneeze. It's going to happen. Good. All right. I'm allergic to talking about my feelings. So you get put back up on the curb without even thinking. And then all of a sudden you're like, whew, it hits you, right? And all the feelings come in and all the hormones and the shaking, like, what just happened? Now you're beginning to process it. Well, what your brain did was it short-circuited you. It said, you're about to get hit by a bus, move your feet. Feet go back up on the curb. Then it allows the rational brain to process it, because our bodies know better that if you would have thought about it, you would have been dead. So that's the short route. The long route is when you see the bus coming, right? You take the time to consider what's going on. And that's what happens when you expect the bus isn't going to hit you. So your brain has this short circuit, this feel before think, for a reason of survivability. It's very, very important. What you need to realize, and this is the foundation all emotional intelligence is built upon, is that you can't do anything about that. Kind of. I'm going to show you how you can long term. But short term, the fact that you feel right away is human. It's human. Being emotional before you're rational is human. So here is the science of emotional intelligence. Bring us back a slide here. We're almost to our first break. The science of emotional intelligence is basically this. Since this is true, what can we do about it? That's the question that emotional intelligence seeks to ask. Because we know if we make violently emotional decisions all the time, if we're allowing our emotions to guide us, that keeps us from being as rational, as long route as we want to be. So what do we do about it if we can't eliminate the emotions? And this is what emotional intelligence seeks to resolve. And this is the short answer to that. What we can do is train ourselves not to eliminate emotions, but to process them differently. So for example, right, when I was in the military, we learned to process the emotion of some emergency happening, whether it's someone shooting at you or a fire starting or whatever. And what we learn to do is not to try to fight the emotion, but to immediately respond to the threat. So the emotion triggered a right response, not a paralysis response, for example, or a wrong response. right? So for example, you're in the military. You hear the alarm bells going off. You've got to get to your battle stations. That is not the time to panic and start asking what's going on, to grabbing people, to figuring out what's happening. It's a time to move your feet. So interestingly, in the military, they don't sit there and talk to you about the emotions. What do? They drill you over and over and over and over again. When this happens, do this response. And what that does is your brain has electronic pathways. And over time, those pathways become highways. They start off as little worn pathways in the grass, if you will, and over time they become a little wider until they become highways. This takes time. And you can train yourself to respond well. And you see this with like emergency response workers. You wonder why policemen and firefighters are so cool, calm, and collected under pressure, because they have those pathways. Later on, though, they have to deal with the results of that. But in the moment, they've been trained to filter things. Not that their emotion goes away, though they may think so. It's not. They've learned to respond appropriately in spite of the emotions. I have to keep repeating this because it's the thing we always forget. It's the most important lesson in emotional intelligence. I'll say it one more time. Emotional intelligence is not about eliminating emotions whatsoever. It's about learning to better filter the emotions, not filter out, but filter through, so that you have the right response. It's doing the right thing in spite of how you feel, not without feeling. And if you think about this, has major impacts on our life, because what are we always trying to do? We're always trying to become less emotional so that we can make a good decision. What I want you to learn how to do is to make a good decision while being emotional. As a matter of fact, emotions are good. The more emotional you are, the more you can connect with people, and the more human you simply are. We don't need leaders that don't feel. We need leaders that are so incredibly compassionate, so incredibly empathetic, and yet so wise at the same time. This is what emotional intelligence does. This is what much of our society must learn. And guess what? There was a time, even just 100 years ago, where we trained it. I want to say one other thing here, one other small part before we get into our break. We're about 10 minutes from our break. If we don't do this, we end up getting emotionally hijacked. That's the short circuit. Now, I've already told you, you get a short circuit if all of a sudden some major event happened. You almost got in a car accident, almost hit by a bus. You'll get the short circuit. But you know, we short circuit ourselves sometimes just driving to work. Sometimes with an argument with someone we live with. We can become so emotional that we do things we otherwise wouldn't have done. And I'm not just talking about saying something you didn't mean. I'm talking about an absolute emotional hijacking where you just lose it. And there's two types of losing it, by the way. Not everyone rages, right? There's the violent losing it. There's the attack mode where we lose it. Just can't take it anymore. But then there's also the flight mode. There's the hide away. There's the I'm never going to go back out into the world mode. And for many people, especially when we look at something right now like coronavirus, for a lot of people, they've been emotionally hijacked by fear. And what started off as a caution has become a paralysis. And this is an emotional hijacking. Even though we can look at evidence and we can look at things and think rationally, we have a hard time processing the emotion involved. So every politician in the world is making both emotional and rational decisions. Now, of course, some will say they're making more rational decisions and some are saying they're making more emotional decisions. But the fact of the matter is that they're all making both. What we want to avoid is the emotional hijacking first and foremost. We don't want to be driving to work and someone cuts us off, so we turn around and go home. We don't want to be driving to work and someone cuts us off, so we run them off the road. You go, well, I wouldn't do that. People do. Why? Emotional hijacking. Now, does this mean that they're not morally responsible? Again, emotional intelligence is not the science of morality. That's its own school, right? Ethics is its own school. This is simply scientific. It's not here to justify anyone's behavior. It's just explaining what occurred in the brain. That's it. And emotional hijackings are a major problem. And it's not simply a problem of education. So like I said, 100 years ago, we trained this stuff. How did we do it? Well, we did it in our homes and in our communities. If you think about it, 100 years ago, you know, when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we talk about people in the 1800s going out west. We talk about World War I, World War II. Those were very, very difficult years. And certainly people were traumatized by them, but not like today. We got through it. Why? Because we learned how to be emotionally intelligent in our homes and in our communities back in those days. Now, they were different. I understand we have more impulses today and life's different today. I'm not saying that they were better people or anything like that. I'm just saying they were careful. They knew this was important. As a matter of fact, when public school systems were getting set up in the United States during the Industrial Revolution, people sat down, these really smart people in Washington sat down and said, what do we need to train people on? What do we want to train our next generation on? And they said, well, we need to make sure that they're wise. We need to make sure that they can make decisions under pressure. We need to make sure that they're strong and mentally tough. Emotional intelligence was on the table. And you know what their response was? That's very, very, very important. So the absolute maximum amount of importance, but we're already doing it. We don't need that in our schools. They do that at home. So what do we need? What aren't they doing at home? We need engineers. We need scientists. We need infrastructure. We need doctors. So they decided to train reading, writing, and arithmetic, sciences, and this has continued to today. And the public school system today, we still see a tremendous emphasis on sciences. And that's great. But they never intended to get away from emotional intelligence. But we got away from it in our communities. So now what do we have? Now we have the smartest kids who've ever walked the earth who can create bombs in their living room, but they're using them on each other. This is a problem. This is a problem. They have the intelligence to create the weapons. They don't have the emotional intelligence to process why they shouldn't be using them. And of course, these are more complex issues than just this, but emotional intelligence seeks to change the world by changing one person at a time, by helping us process everything that's going on. Not only have we gotten away from it, but we have a tremendous need for it. Things are coming at us faster than ever. You simply turn on the news and you have traumatic event after traumatic event after traumatic event, perhaps even traumatic events, and most likely traumatic events that don't even affect you personally, that now you have to process. We not only have gotten away from emotional intelligence, but we've gotten to a place where we need emotional intelligence more than ever. So I put all this before you as we get into now the what we do about it part to show you why this matters. Because if you can learn even a little bit how to do this and then show others to do the same or influence others through this, we actually can change the world through emotional intelligence. It's very, very important. And this is why it's one of the fastest growing sciences out there today. As a matter of fact, Fortune 100 companies hire people based on it. So you can absolutely put it on your resume. And I would encourage you to do so, that you have had emotional intelligence training, because companies are looking for it. They want to know that we're doing this because they want their leaders to be able to be emotionally intelligent. So what we're going to do for the next hour, maybe slightly more, is we're going to go through each of these 5 components, and I'm going to practically help you work through each one. So the main part of the lecture, if you will, is over. We're going to get into workshop mode now. So we're going to go through some self-awareness exercises. We're going to go through some self-regulation, motivation, social skills, empathy exercises, so that you can say, hey, I did some of this, and you can actually put it on your resume that you've been through some of this training. But we're going to take a break now. We're going to take, let's take 10 solid minutes. I'll come back early for some questions, but let's come back at, we'll go a little longer. We'll go about 14 minutes. Get yourself some coffee, some water, some breakfast if you need. Let's come back at 10:10. At 10:10, I'll come back at about 10:05 for questions, but we'll start the exercises at 10:10. See you guys in just a few minutes. All right. I know you guys are still on break, but I'll start taking some questions. I see Luke put one in the chat there. Start my video up here. So Luke had a good question. I'm just going to, if you guys can see what he wrote in the chat, but he's talking about people who are addicted to things like social media and the news. Do they need to unplug from that because it cripples their emotions and decision making? A few questions here. Let me take that first one. So, the idea of do we need to unplug or not? I think it's more important that we look at the second part of your question. When it cripples your emotions and rational decision making, we need to consider our inputs. So one of the coolest parts, and I'm glad you asked this because it's not in the presentation, we wouldn't have had time to get to it otherwise. One of the coolest things that emotional intelligence does, it's really helped me, is understanding your brain as a resource, especially an energy resource. So your brain only has so much fuel in it. And some people have more fuel than others to get through the day, but about emotional fatigue, about mental fatigue. Everyone struggles with these fatigues. So if you wake up after sleeping, if you've rested well at all, with more resources gained, the body's restored those resources. And if you really want to use the most resources on the most important things, then we want to conserve those resources for those things. So I'll give you a really simple, practical example of this. I'm wearing a simple black polo today. I didn't have to think about what I was going to wear. As a matter of fact, no matter what people might think of me, I call this my Zoom shirt. Almost every single Zoom I'm on, this is the shirt I choose. I don't think about getting dressed in the morning, because when your brain is still waking up and it's foggy, you really don't want to tax it then. You want to get it strong first. You want to get it woken up and applying and ramped up and focused. So one of the worst things you can do is wake up in the morning and not know what you're going to eat for breakfast, not know what you're going to wear, be in a rush, be frantic, be thinking, be walking through everything you got to do that day. That craziness is why we get to work and we have bad days and can't think clearly. So you're better off waking up and not thinking at all, making the first hour of your day kind of brainless, and it works because you're conserving those resources. So to bring that back to Luke's question, if social media, news, and things like that are taxing you, you're processing all that, you're thinking about all that, you're focusing on all that, you're especially feeling, if you notice you're getting an emotional response to that, those resources are being depleted. And it may be unnecessary, and that's for you to decide. I have people in my life that believe that I'm a fool for not paying more attention to world events all the time. I also notice that they're some of the most unhappy, miserable people that I know. And I don't just detach from those things because I want to be happy. It's not some sort of selfish self-protection or something like that. I am aware of what's going on in the world, but I'm not as aware as they are. I recognize there's things happening. I've obviously paid attention to the presidential election and the pandemic, and I know what's happening with those things as well as I believe I need to, as I choose to. But I don't stay glued to the counterpoint of the news media personally, because it taxes me, because I'm emotionally involved when I do. And there's other people that don't. They watch it for sheer entertainment. There's people that just don't really, it's just what they have on. I choose to avoid that. I'd rather have on something else. And that's not saying that you need to do that, but one of the major reasons I do that is because of this, because of emotional intelligence. So to answer your question in short, Luke, I think it's a good idea to unplug from those things if it's crippling you. And if you don't think it's crippling you, let me rechange the word cripple. If it's impacting you and not causing you to take a positive action, meaning it's simply draining you, but you're not really doing anything other than being drained, then I would walk away. And then Luke's second part to his question, how do we effectively filter things that are created to break through the filter? And we're going to talk about that. And that's, by the way, Luke, incredibly wise, right? literally like every amount of marketing out there. Everything is involved to get your attention, to take you off this, and then to cause you to be emotional, because emotionally made decisions are faster than rational made decisions, is what we're going to look at here. So, so we have to be able to effectively filter them. And one of the best ways is to simply turn them off. Like you said, is part of our filtering choosing which things to connect ourselves to. Yes. Yes. And we're going to talk about that. And I love your example, a well-known songwriter saying in an interview, he lost the ability to write songs until he unplugged from Twitter. So there was a period of 2 years that I did not have television, and I have it back now. But there was a period of time, I still had internet, which is probably worse, but I didn't have television in my home. And I can tell you, I read more books and life slowed down so well that I miss it. And if it wasn't for the fact that I'm not the only voice in this household, I probably would return to that. I spend plenty of time online, so don't think for some reason like I'm some guru on that. So that was all very good, Luke, and you're hitting it here already. Off our break, almost off our break. Any other questions? That was a good one. We're going to be unpacking that more. If you have any other questions, get them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask.
Well, Thom, maybe it's because I, have a longer perspective, being older, and I'm interested in history. And as you've been talking about the science, I'm thinking how it can be, and that you use the term hijack, being emotionally hijacked. And I'm thinking that where whole societies, governments, like the evil side. When I'm thinking about, like, say in Germany and the Nazis, and how you talk about the little path becoming a highway, and how a whole society can, and I'm thinking of the term brainwash, how they can be trained. It's like how so this whole science, emotional of intelligence, there is like the dark side, how it can be taken over by bad people with bad motivations, and how they can shape a whole society, a whole group of people to, and train them, drill them to do what we view, and most people, not everybody, because we live in this polarized world, and that another big issue is how do you get, it's like there's like the brain has been severed. If you want to use that metaphor of the brain being severed, it's like our whole culture has been severed into, 50% for, 50% against. So I just want to, I know I'm blathering here. I'm sorry.
No, it's helpful.
But
so, no, it's helpful because
as someone where I come from my background, from a, and I come from a father who was a naval officer and a teacher, and he was he taught history. He was very interested in history. So, that's coming from, that's where I'm coming from. So I don't know how you can
that's
address
helpful.
that.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note there that to segment off emotional intelligence from some of the science you're talking about there. So when we talk about sociology, we talk about education, those schools, there's always an overlap with emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence seeks to avoid becoming a weapon, meaning emotional intelligence doesn't really involve neuro-linguistic programming, what you're talking about, NLP. Neuro-linguistic programming. Emotional intelligence seeks to avoid telling us how to manipulate our brains. In a sense, it does tell us how our brains are manipulated. So there's that overlap there to what you're talking about. But it seeks to filter its primary thing. Remember, it's emotional first, intelligence second, right? So its primary idea is understanding the emotional stimuluses that are coming in, and being able to make rational decisions, even though that's coming in. So it doesn't seek to then weaponize how to do that to people, but in a sense, by understanding that in the brain, people can take advantage of that. And certainly, even without understanding how the brain works, we've been taking advantage of it for years. I mean, I think marketing is a great example of that. What do commercials try to get you to do? What do great salespeople try to get you to do? They try to get you to get really fired up about something, get really emotional. Why? Why do we put urgency in all of our buys? Because if you can just make it, if you don't go home and think about it, you're more likely to do it. Why? Because the emotion is not being filtered out. If any of us really filtered out the emotions, we probably wouldn't own half the crap we own. So in a sense, even just sales is built upon taking advantage of this part of the human psyche. Now, what you're talking about, you take something like Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 40s, and what happened there goes, I think, a little bit, transcends a little bit more beyond this. But what I will say is where emotional intelligence has studied that is in simply studying how people filtered that. So, you read 100 history books, you may get 100 different answers. But there was a time in Germany when people didn't really know what was going on as much as we would know today. They weren't as in touch. But once it kind of the veil came off and they saw some of the evils of what was happening, there were many people that kind of retreated into themselves. They went along with it. There was a lot of fear. So to your point, we had been there, and this is even not just in Germany, this was really around the world. There was a lot of training to kind of follow and not necessarily to question. And so when it happened, they didn't have the ability to really process things, to know what to do. It's a very, very simple answer. But neuro-linguistic programming, the mass media type of influence, the mass control, as it's called, that we saw happening in Germany at that time, I don't know if it really necessarily tried to use emotional intelligence as a way to get people to comply, but I will say that they certainly were not prepared to deal with what was happening. And, I don't think the whole world was able to. I think one of the reasons America actually did so well in World War II is because we were separated by an ocean. I think being separated by the ocean, a lot of Americans weren't thinking of impending invasion. I think we were a little bit more rational. We felt like we had the high ground, if you will. And I think we were able to respond and invade, where if you're in France in the early 1940s and impending invasion is coming, a lot of people weren't sure what to do. You had people going underground, literally. And, a lot of infighting, and so France fell very quickly. But anyway, I could talk about that all day too. Emotional intelligence, though, we want to make sure we keep it in its very tiny box. It's a very tiny box. It's that box of stimulus coming in, processing, and then on the other side of that, emotion still present, rational decision made, making rational decisions in spite of it. All right, let's move to that's a very good observation, very good, very, very good question. And you're going to start to see, as we talk about this, you're going to start to see where it bleeds over and everything else. You'll see it in the news media big time. So to your point, that's where the mass control media efforts of the Nazis definitely took advantage of this science. And we still see it today. Actually, it's only gotten worse today, unfortunately. Today, think about it, you're watching the news. What is constantly going across the screen? Whoosh, breaking news, whoosh, breaking news, whoosh, big thing happening. All of a sudden, oh, we're cutting over here is another big thing. We're cutting over here, there's another big thing. You used to get a pamphlet every once in a while in the 1940s warning you of impending doom. Now the pamphlet's popping up on your social news feed and on your TVs every 15 to 20 seconds. Your resources are depleted. Can't handle it. That's where they're not taking advantage of emotional intelligence as much as we need to be aware of what's occurring in our emotional intelligence. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, to your point, Holly just put in the chat, actually, there are people today that have just raised the white flag on this. There's what's called rage culture. There are people that are saying, our rage is justified, therefore we will not act rationally or appeal to anyone's rational mind because we don't believe they are human. And so we're going to respond with pure emotion. And I would say that that is a real problem, even if they're right. And I could get on a soapbox about this and how our public education system has had a lot to do with it, but I won't do that now. I want to keep you all as my friends. But it is a major problem. The emotion, as Kristen just said in the chat, the emotional hijacking of the American population is occurring. And to the point someone made earlier, maybe we turn off so we can think again. Not a bad idea, but at the same time, we don't want to go hide either. So let's look at this a little bit more. How do we filter? That's where it starts. Whether or not, see, we start to get into the ethics conversation whenever we talk about emotional intelligence, but remember, ethics is its own school. This is just talking about our brains. It all begins with self-awareness. All begins with self-awareness. You can only become as emotionally intelligent as your self-awareness allows. I get calls all the time. Thom, we need help dealing with the situation. Thom, I need coaching on this. Thom, I need coaching on that. Okay, we're going to talk about self-awareness because that's where it begins. It's why therapy begins with talking about your life, because the more self-aware we are, the better it is. Now, if we still only stay in self-awareness, then you just stay in therapy for a long time. I'm more like a physical therapist. I want to get you out and mobile again. I don't want you to just be talking about why you are the way you are all the time, as unfortunately a lot of therapists do, keep you in therapy for a long time. I'm not as concerned about why you are the way you are. I want to get you functional, right? I want to get myself functional, and I want to function at the highest levels. And that's why I love emotional intelligence, because that's what it's about. So let's start off by growing in self-awareness. So if emotional intelligence is our ability to be rational, not less emotional, right? I asked a friend of mine recently who brags about how he says he's non-emotive. He says he has no emotions at all. I've explained the science to him, but he still doesn't believe it and he thinks he's non-emotional. I asked him what his emotional intelligence was on a scale of 1 to 10. He said 10. And I told him, no, you're more like a 1. He said, why? I go, because you don't understand your own emotions to the point where you think you don't have them. That's not emotional intelligence. That's not self-awareness. Instead, you should be aware of your emotions and be plugged into them, yet still make good rational decisions. So your question, put this in the chat if you don't mind sharing, or don't, write it down. It's kind of private. But rate your own emotional intelligence on a scale of 1 to 10, not just right now. You got to kind of take the highs and the lows, not just rating how emotional you are, but how much is your emotions influencing your actions. If you feel like you got a lot of emotions, but you generally are able to filter and make wise decisions and all of that, then you're probably closer to maybe 8, 9, or 10. If you feel overwhelmed all the time, you have analysis of paralysis and things like that. By the way, totally normal. It isn't how good of a person are you, how bad of a person are you. You know, I ask this question of all my classes, and typically the average answer is somewhere around a 6. That's what I typically see on this question, but I'll give you a second to answer it. Remember, this is a self-awareness exercise, so the more honest you are, the better. Good, kind of seeing a 4 to 6 range there. Now, the next question is probably the tougher one. Would your closest friend or relative agree? Would the people that live with you give you the same score that you just gave yourself? So I would like to think I'm an 8, but I think my wife would put me closer to the 4. So what I like to do is take, don't ask Sam, Kristen, don't ask Sam. What I would do is take I would take your score and kind of -1 or 2 is usually pretty honest, or take your score and go ask the people around you. Some people just have tremendous humility on this. You go and ask the people around you and they give you a better score. By the way, that's what we're looking for. We want you to give yourself a lower score than people around you, because remember, emotional intelligence isn't just about you. It's about other people. And so leadership would be them saying you're an 8 while you know you're a 6. That's kind of what we're looking for. I think that's kind of like we never arrived, but that's closer to it, if you will. So next, identify your primary emotions. Your primary emotions. We all have every emotion. I don't cry very often, only at movies when there's sad music playing. But I have primary emotions. These are the emotions that I'm expressing through all the time. So for me, it's optimism. I tend to be kind of optimistic all the time. But also irritability, interestingly. I can be very irritable. It can be very intense. It's probably irritable is not so much the word as much as intense. I get very intense, intensely focused while being optimistic. I'm in a sense an angry optimist. But those are just my primary emotions. It's just the feelings that come quickest. I express through them. So list out your primary emotions. If someone met you, would they say, so-and-so is a happy person, so-and-so is an angry person, so-and-so is a fearful person, so-and-so is an irritated, optimistic. Usually we have 2 that we're kind of always transmitting. Someone put some of those in the chat too. What are your primary emotions? When it comes to talking about our feelings, the chat gets quiet. What is this, therapy? No. Technically. Hunger is not an emotion, Luke. So Kristen, the anxious optimist. Yep, so that's good. And one way to put this is the easiest way to figure this out is, are you more fight or flight? Are you more fight or are you more flight? Most people are flight. Most people are flight. And interestingly, the fight people get all the bad names, right? We're the ones that, because flight can hide, you know? But flight is oftentimes just as bad as fight. Very good. You guys are in touch. Appreciate that. We're going to be using this with self-regulation. So we're actually in this self-awareness exercise, we're actually moving closer to self-regulation. You guys are good. These are good answers. Some people can balance both. Some people can go fight or flight, either one. Everyone's a little different. And actually, your behavior style has a lot to do with this. So I do a lot of DISC training. DISC is a behavior language. And in some ways, you're kind of born this way, how you prefer to transmit the emotions you use. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, the idea there is no matter how you might be, what your tendency might be, you can filter, not eliminate. And so filter sounds like there's an elimination. Because if you have a filter and you have stuff coming in, it eliminates, say, waste, right? We filter out our water, meaning we eliminate waste. When I say filter in the terms of emotional intelligence, I don't mean eliminate waste. I mean process. I mean everything goes through the filter, but what we do is we become rational, and so our rational brain says, this is the stuff I'm going to listen to, this is the stuff I'm not going to listen to because I know why. Very important I say this. If I've lost you or you haven't been paying attention as I've rambled here, get this part, because I should have said this earlier. Ultimately, the science of emotional intelligence is this. Here's my filter. Impulse is coming in. So let's say I'm having an argument with someone, right? Or someone is being confrontational with me. Someone I live with is, say, really trying to change my mind about something. You're in that difficult political discussion, whatever it is, right? Here comes the filter. So inputs are coming in. Now, if someone's, say, arguing with my political point of view, I'm not big into politics, but let's just say someone's arguing with my political point of view, I'm going to feel things they say, right? So let's say they're accusing me of being ignorant, or they're accusing me of all these things. That makes me feel upset, or it makes me feel angry, irritable. I know the reason I'm feeling that way is because of the words they use. So my filter doesn't eliminate that because I'm just not that powerful. So what my filter will do is say, the irritability is coming from those words. I'm going to process that into the dustbin, meaning I can't eliminate it, but I'm not going to listen to it. But what I will listen to are other words they use, right? Words that reveal how they're feeling, words that reveal how they're thinking. And then I can use empathy and actually understand how they're feeling. At the same time, while I'm doing that, though, I'm still feeling all that irritability. I'm still feeling all that irritability. And I'm not trying to tuck it down. What do we normally try to do? We try to press that down, suppress that. It's going to explode later. Instead, I'm allowing those feelings of irritability to come through while empathizing with them, while having rational conversation. That's emotional intelligence, guys. And that's why it's what hostage negotiators use. It's what mediators use. It's what coaches and therapists use, at least the good ones. Some of them just are really good at suppressing their emotions, and they go home and they put it in a bottle. But the good ones process it. Now, here's the big win for you. Over time, as you do that more and more, you wear those pathways into your brain. Not that it, in a sense, becomes easier, but it becomes more reflexive. So someone calls you a name, you still feel it, but your response is to say, yeah, I'm curious. Why might you say that to me, instead of, I can't believe you just said that to me? You still feel it. Maybe not as heightened, but you still feel it, but you process it quicker. And that's what self-regulation does, but it starts with the self-awareness, this ability to understand how you tick. Hey, when people say this or that, it causes me to respond a certain way. So next, what I want to work on, you've said how you feel, what your primary emotions are. What are your big triggers? Now, triggers are going to send you more fight or more flight. Triggers are the pathways already worn into our brain. It's the pathways already worn into our brain. So, for example, some of y'all, I'm pointing fingers now, some of y'all got triggers on traffic, right? You're driving to work, the first person that brakes too early, goes too slow in the left lane, you see texting on their phone while driving. Some of y'all have got triggers. These are things you've justified the emotion on. Attitude, insult, certain opinions maybe have triggered you to a point where you go, the minute I hear it, I respond. Now, again, we don't do that because of necessarily some sort of weakness. We've justified it once, then twice, then 3 times, and now you can't help but to have a tremendous emotional response when these things come up. Wide pathway in the brain. That is a trigger. We always have them at home. We often have them at work. Don't tend to have them as much when we're alone. So maybe somebody put some triggers in there that wouldn't be indecent. Don't trigger yourself in the process if you can help it. Let me get a couple of people in the chat to put some of their triggers. And it's unlikely anyone's going to put anything in there that we morally disagree with, right? But still, it's a trigger. These are good. So if you don't want to put them in the chat, I just suggest that you write some down. We won't get any better if we don't identify these. Remember, triggers are the things we've already worn the wide pathway in. In a sense, it's the hardest thing to deal with because it's the thing we've allowed through. Remember, we're not trying to eliminate the emotion. We're trying to better process it. You have worn a pathway into your head that when someone lies to you or yells at you, that you're going to respond in this way And that makes it harder to not only reach people, but harder to protect the resources that we have, even though you're right. As a matter of fact, the most frequent trigger we see as we study this are justifiable triggers, right? We don't usually get triggered because someone, you know, serves a dessert we didn't like, you know. I mean, I hope you're not triggered by those things too often, but you probably are triggered by evil. You're triggered by things that everyone would agree with. We justify these things easier, yet over time, these triggers become pathways in our brain that don't allow us to be rational. And this is powerful, powerful, powerful. We talk about the news media and stuff like that. Yeah, they're using this big time. We wonder sometimes, I was getting on a soapbox for another 30 seconds. We wonder sometimes why politicians can't talk to one another, why in society we can't have conversations when we have differing beliefs. Triggers, guys. It's just triggers. It's triggers. Chris and I are a great example. We probably are, we agree on a ton of stuff. We share a lot of the same core values. We've got lots in common. But I think the reason we know that is because of how we focused on our conversation. There's other areas in life where we could be more polar opposites. And in people that are opposite in the ways that Chris and I are opposites, oftentimes we're at war with each other in society, but we're not. I'm not saying that's because we're better people. I'm just saying it's because we're trying to be emotional intelligent, I would hope. And we're certainly focusing on the core values that we have in common. We believe that there is a unity amongst differences. And that's really what made America great in the first place. And so that's what we need. And we all know we need that in society. But the fact of the matter is that when we have a lack of emotional intelligence, we're unable to do it. Even some of the things some of you guys are typing in here, they're very, very wise, but will never influence anyone or be able to continue to cohabitate with other people if we can't do this. And that doesn't mean we tolerate everything, but conversation can't happen without emotional intelligence. All right, off the soapbox, onto self-regulation. So if you're highly self-aware, now we can do something about it. And yep, that's right. We're an hour and a half into the training, and now we're finally talking about what to do about it. Because I'm telling you, without that foundation that we've already laid, you will keep falling back to the thing of, I need to get rid of my emotions. I need to not be afraid. I need to not be afraid. I need to not be angry. I need to not be angry. No, you don't. You need to be angry, but don't make a mistake. You need to be afraid, but still act. That's called courage. That's called wisdom, right? And we need to stop saying we need to be less emotional, because that's not going to help you. Self-regulated people are able to control their own impulses and actions regardless of the emotions involved, because we're not trying to eliminate the emotions. The emotions will be processed out eventually on their own. By the way, if you have an emotional hijacking, if you become so emotional that all of those hormones fire, I've got bad news for you. You are intoxicated. That's right, intoxicated. When your body releases hormones, I'm talking about things like adrenaline, and there's good hormones too, but I'm talking about things like adrenaline, oxytocin, all these types of things that make us feel, even though you might calm down mentally and your brain might become a little bit more rational, you still have those hormones in your system for usually 4 to 6 hours. You are triggered. You are still under the influence of them. I'll give you a great example. You get in a car accident, right? You're shaken up. You don't know what just happened. You get out of the car. You feel all this adrenaline, right? You're like, man, I don't know what's happening. Sometimes you can feel good. You just have all these emotions. And people go, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good now. I'm relaxed now. You get in your friend's car, you drive home, you're sitting on the couch a little bit. You okay? I'm fine. I'm okay now. A little tired. Why are you tired? Because you had a lot of emotions, resources drained, a little tired, but I'm okay now. But really, if for the next 6 to 12 hours, you're under the influence of those emotions. If anything else were to happen, you might melt down faster. This is why when you're driving to work in the morning and you're triggered by traffic, and you get to work and you hate your job, everything seems to be amplified, even though you in your mind, traffic is behind you, because the hormones are already in you. So the whole day you're amped. And I would even put before you this: most Americans today are triggered all the time. All the time. You ever notice when you go on vacation, it's like you just suddenly, and you unplug from everything, you just suddenly feel like so much like clearer? Because we wake up triggered, guys. We get out of bed triggered, depleted, emotionally hijacked to some level, hormones under the influence all day. And we know this, but we've come to accept it. Stress is an acceptable norm. Imagine if we responded to stress like we do to pandemic. What if we called it the stress pandemic? You know? But that's another story for another day. My point, our awareness will let us know, and you can begin regulating. How do we do it? Well, we start with the short term, 2 types of regulation: what I can do in the moment and what I can do preparing for the moment. I'll say that again, 2 types of regulations: what we can do in the moment, crisis management, and what we do preparing for crisis management, muscle building, right? That type of stuff. So first thing we do is we identify something physical we can do when we become aware of an emotional trigger or response. This is the immediate crisis mode. And in this, you're going to treat your brain like it's an animal, right? This is not, we're going to get really, really base here. You've probably heard of the famous experiment done many years ago called Pavlov's dogs. So Dr. Pavlov was a famous behavioral psychologist, and he did a very famous experiment with dogs. And what he did was he fed dogs every single day. And every time he fed these dogs, he would ring a bell. Feed them at different times, didn't matter. Every time he fed them, he rang a bell. And then in science, of course, we observe, repeat, and see if we get different results. And what he found is every time he fed dogs and rang a bell, and then didn't feed them and rang a bell, they salivated. Now, bells don't make you hungry. Bells don't make dogs hungry either. You go ring a bell around a dog, they'll just look at you funny, right? Some of you talked about cats earlier. Can opener, right? You open the can, you can start the can opener, the cat gets hungry, even if the cat's full. Sometimes we're the same way. The sound of sizzling, right? Certain smells, whatever, cause us to be hungry. That's a learned response. It's a learned response. So if you can take a dog, feed them every day at the same time, ring a bell, and then just ring a bell randomly, and the dog salivates, we can do this in the same way in our own life. If you have certain things that have triggered you every single day to feel a certain way, in a sense, that trigger has become that bell in your life. So you can use this as a positive response. Now, to someone's point earlier, do people use emotional intelligence to manipulate anyone? Well, this is how it can be done. But basically, it's Pavlov's dogs. This is, in a sense, neurolinguistic programming. It's probably about the only part of this type of science that really involves this. But I'll give you an example. So when I first got into training, I wasn't doing things remote like this, where I could just talk at you for 4 hours. It was in a classroom. People would interrupt me, all that stuff, which I didn't really mind. But sometimes people would challenge me, especially in my sales training classes. People would fight with me about things. And even though I was okay with it, I was a little nervous. I was a new trainer. And so I would get red-faced and I would just be irritated. And even though I was trying not to be, people could tell that I was irritated. And I was like, how do I get rid of this emotion? Well, then I took emotional intelligence training and I learned I can't get rid of the emotion. But I didn't want it even to be visible. I didn't want to have such a fast response. And so I used Pavlov's dogs. So whenever someone interrupts me in a training, to this day, I have made the choice to get a bottle of water, and while they're talking, I'll go ahead. While they're talking, I drink. It's not usually offensive to them. I make eye contact. Now what has happened many years later, this happened actually just after several months of doing this, is when I get irritated, I get thirsty. When someone challenges me, I get thirsty. Because I've trained myself that challenges go to drink, I suddenly notice my thirst. But here's the benefit of that. That reminds me what I should do in the moment. It reminds me of my emotional intelligence training, which I reach for a bottle of water and drink, because while I'm drinking, what can't I do? I can't respond. I can't talk. I can be quiet and I can listen. And as I'm drinking, I'm reminding myself, empathize, consider, respond, understand. Left to my own devices, I would have just popped off a faster answer. I used to be very, very quickly argumentative with people. I've learned to seek first to understand rather than being understood. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree, but I find that if I understand what people are saying a lot better, I'm much more persuasive. But my immediate response for many years has been to argue. To this day, it would be. But the minute I feel that feeling to argue, I get thirsty. And as I'm drinking, I'm regulating. That's a crisis response. You can have these too. And what we do after our crisis response is we apply what's called the STAR technique, which just means stop, think, assess, respond, review. Basically, be rational and don't be a jerk, right? That's what it means. Stop, think, assess, respond, review. So here's what I want you to do. And this is hard, okay? This is hard. And some of you have to take this for homework. But I want you to think about those trigger moments. Say it's traffic, whatever you listed before, those trigger moments. And I want you to think, what is something I can do in the moment? What's my Pavlov's dog's bell? What's something I can do in the moment? It may not change how you feel. Remember, we're not trying to do that, but it will slow you down enough to STAR. All this is a speed bump from your normal reaction to get you to a rational response. And remember, some of you might be thinking, oh, I'll take a walk, I'll go take a nap. A lot of times you're backed into a corner when this is happening. You can't really do that when someone's yelling at you or you're in traffic. You can't really always pull over, right? So what can you do in the moment to begin rewiring your brain? I'll give you a moment to think about that. Someone wants to put some in the chat. If you've ever, some of you may have already developed this. You just weren't realize you were doing this. But I'll give you a couple from some students I've had in the past that have been very helpful. So I've done this training a lot in leadership training. And so a lot of these people get nervous in interviews. People have to interview people. Believe it or not, they're as nervous sometimes as the person being interviewed. I've done this training a lot with people that have to counsel people and fire people and stuff like that. And they're like, what can we do in those moments? And you've heard a lot of people talk about the deep breath, right? Take a deep breath, or as Patricia said, count to 10. And those things are helpful. But what I want you to do is you have to learn that you're doing that so you can apply the STAR technique. So if you're going to take a deep breath, I would add to that to pinch the spot between your thumb and your pointer finger. You actually get pressure there. It's actually a pressure point anyway. Sometimes can relieve headaches and stuff like that. So take your deep breath, but then squeeze that spot. And what will happen is when you take that deep breath when something's going on, anytime you take a deep breath, your hand will start going right to that spot. And that's weird. That's weird. Because it's weird, it'll always remind you of why it's weird. And you'll go, STAR technique. Stop, think, assess, respond, review. They're not the enemy. They're emotionally hijacked, not me. I just know I need to ask questions. So there has to be a 2.0 to this. It's not just about calming down. You have to have what to do next. You have to have what to do next. This doesn't prepare you for every situation in life. It prepares you for how you've prepared. This is, again, why I use it in leadership training. You can't go into an interview and not know what questions you're going to ask, right? But even if you know what questions to ask and you're nervous, or so you get thrown off the script and you got to get back on the script, these little things allow you to go from emotionally controlled to rationally able. I'll also remind you once again of this. Let the emotions remain. Let the emotions remain. You're just going to now move to rational while being emotional. And rational is a behavior that is appropriate. Yelling back, not an appropriate behavior. How do I know? Because every time you go to someone after an argument, they go, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this or that. What, did you not know better? Of course you knew better. Well, why didn't you? Emotions got the best of you. Okay, so this is where this comes in. Squeeze. I'm not going to yell back. Doesn't mean you're not angry. I don't need to calm down. I'm just not going to yell back. Makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world, guys. That little tweak right there. Find your trigger, think through your trigger, and try developing something like this with your trigger, and email me if it changes your response. So that's short term. What about the long term? And the long term is more significant. The long term is what changes lives. It's not the things we just do in the moment. It's the long term stuff that really changes lives. We're coming up on our next break. We're going to finish self-regulation. We're going to go into our next break. We'll do another 30 minutes of emotional intelligence, then we'll switch to time management. So long term is the stuff you do to get ready, right? It's putting yourself in that best form of you so that you have your shields up for when the world comes at you. So that type of regulation is some of the stuff some of the people were mentioning before, like Luke, who said, maybe I need to unplug from stuff. So it's a self-examination. Again, we become more self-aware. It's asking the tough questions like, hey, is news media really helping me? Maybe I need to unplug from it because maybe it's hurting my relationships. You know, is there something else that I'm doing so much in my life I need to stop doing? I need more positive habits. That's the self-awareness leading to the self-regulation. But you can do this daily. So one of the things that we typically do is we try to get through a day. We get home and we're like, I'm glad that day is over. But we haven't learned from the day. From here on out, I would encourage you to learn from every single day. Every mistake you've made, every good thing that's happened to you, every bad thing that's happened to you has happened to you for a reason. It is simply information. Information. So everything that happened before this moment, everything today and before it is information. Even your failures are information. Your failures are information. What do we do with that information? We learn from it. Success is not a lack of failing. Success is taking the information, learning from it, and then making our next reaction, our next behavior better. And guess what? You're going to fail at that too. What do? You take it as information. It's this constant process of fail, inform, fail, improve, fail, inform, fail, improve. That's how you need to look at it. Don't look at it as there's something wrong with me. Look at it as I've learned something about me that can improve. And this is just a smart way of living. And you can do this emotionally. So honest daily inventory looks like this. The end of every day, you say, what triggered me today? What emotion, what responses that I have today that I wish I wouldn't have had? What is the emotion that preceded that? And the goal is not to eliminate that emotion, but to become aware that when this event occurs, the stimulus, I feel this emotion and I have a tendency to this response, and I want to rewire that. How do we rewire that? Becoming hyper aware of it, not ignoring it, becoming hyper aware of it, and then making a choice. Next time that happens, this is specifically what I'm going to do. Next day, same thing maybe happens. Maybe you don't do it again. Take your honest daily inventory at night again. I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to do this tomorrow. The people I've had the pleasure of coaching that are some of the most amazing people I've ever met have learned, whether they're aware or not, to do this very thing. Leaders are always getting better. They're always improving. Even if you don't see the mistakes that are making, maybe they're all happening just in their thought life. They're doing this very practice. Holly had a good question. She said, is unplugging considered flight? Depends. Depends. Sometimes we need to flight in order to gain our senses again. Sometimes there is what's called a strategic retreat. We all need vacations, right? We all need at times to get away. So there's a certain amount of healthy flight, to Luke's point. But if you're just running and you are training yourself to run, that's the bad side. But if you're making a rational choice to unplug from something so you can save resources, that's not flight. That's wisdom. But if you are overwhelmed and you're responding by running, that's flight. So subtle differences, but it's all about that level of control and processing in the brain. Working with other people is a great way to get self-regulation. Look, guys, therapy works. It's not a bad thing. Proactive therapy is way better than you could ever imagine. As a matter of fact, I meet with someone at least right now. I'm actually technically meeting with them once a week, but for other reasons. But there are times in which I will just simply sit with someone and talk about stuff that's going on because it's healthy to get some help in processing. We all have blind spots, and we don't always ask ourselves the best or toughest questions. And so therapy is not necessarily someone giving their opinion on how you should be. It's what our friends do. It's what our relatives do. Therapy is really helping you to ask better questions in a safe place. And so it's a really great thing. Coaching is very similar. It can do that. So getting some help along this way is good, but just make sure that the coach or a therapist you employ is not someone who's there to just diagnose you, but is someone who's there to help you work through things in this way. If you don't have a coach that's not helping you go through some of this self-regulation technique and getting better, they're just asking you what your life was like with your father and telling you what's wrong, and you're just going there every day and just unloading all the problems, and you're not really improving, get a new one. Get a new one. There's a lot of those people out there. Get a new one. All right. We've come to our next break. Before we get into empathy, we're going to real quick in 30 minutes, we're going to cover empathy, motivation, and social skills, because the main thing to take away from emotional intelligence you're going to be able to use is the self-awareness and self-regulation stuff we've talked about. So you know what emotional intelligence is now, you understand how to be more self-aware, and you have some self-regulation to begin taking with you. That's really where we need to leave off, but I want to give you at least the understanding of what the other components are, and then we're going to get into time management. Before I do that, though, let me say one other thing about self-regulation. All of us already know some of the things we should be doing long term. For example, some of you know if you exercise, especially maybe heavy weights, like if you pick up something heavy every day, you know you're better off. Some of you know if you wake up early in the morning and spend some quiet time that you're better off. I want to really impact you here. If you know that, but you don't do it, you need more self-awareness. Sometimes we walk out the door every day as a loaded gun. It's like our emotions are already triggered. We know we should have taken a walk in the morning. We know we should have woke up and exercised, or whatever it is that would have made you a better person, but we decide not to do it. Guys, it's actually a lack of self-awareness. We need to be sober to these things. In a sense, we need to realize how volatile we really are, how fragile we really are, so that we can take the necessary steps to not be that way. What we instead do is we excuse it. Well, I was just tired. We'll get more sleep. Well, I was just busy. We'll be less busy. We got to stop excusing the things that make us these irrational people, these unemotionally intelligent people. And instead, we need to take the appropriate action. That's only going to happen when there's a greater amount of self-awareness. Why? Because pain precedes action. Pain precedes action. It's a good pain. It's a pain that's spurring us on to positive results. So what I want you to do as we go into the break is I want you to think about what those things are that you ought to be doing, that you excuse yourself from not doing, and then you pay the price. I want you to become really aware of that. I want you to find new ways to ensure you don't miss those things. Even if you do them less, I want you to do them more consistently. And perhaps it's just a matter of that daily inventory of realizing, well, had I done this, I probably wouldn't have been that way. So look at your long-term stuff. What are the positive habits in your life you often excuse not doing because emotion? Because emotion. And maybe some of you share that in the chat. For the rest of us, we will go on a break. We will come back. Just a 5-minute break. We're going to come back at 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock. I'll see you in 5. All right, welcome back. I think we'll be picking up the pace here. Looking at some of your triggers, it's awesome. It's triggering me, some of them. Kristen, it's the IRS. I live in a constant mild fear of the IRS. Constant mild fear. I get letters from the IRS like every month saying my address changed because it's like my home office versus my other office on these documents. It's a QuickBooks issue, but anyway, every time I get that letter, I'm like, here we go. This is the day of reckoning. Even though I try to be as honest as possible, I'm still amazed I haven't had to pay them more money. And anyway, long story short, it's always in the back of my head of like one day there's a bad thing coming.
Well, it's like every day
Anyway.
with IRS. I swear I was getting a notice every couple of months. I owe them nitpicking. I owe them $1,000 for this, couple hundred for that, like just nitpicking, penalties, interest, fees, whatever. And I'm over it. So I kind of lost my mind.
Is
on
this
the
from
guy.
your audit that you had a long time ago?
No, has nothing to, no, I just had a really bad CPA for quite a few years who didn't do her job, and I'm paying the price now, basically.
I see.
So, but I have a really good bookkeeper now who keeps me in check, and she's awesome. So yeah, it won't happen again.
I mean, I pay people to do that stuff for me. I have a bookkeeper, I had a bookkeeper. I'm doing that now on my own, but I have an accountant and everything seems to be okay, but I'm always like, it seems too good.
But that's the other thing too. It's like you hire somebody who's supposed to be professional and knowledgeable, and then they do you wrong. And it's like the IRS is so, taxes are so complicated that even a CPA, even a CPA can get it wrong. You know what I mean? It's like if they didn't make things so damn complicated, I wouldn't be owing all this money. It's just, for somebody that pays almost $7,000 a month in payroll taxes for 5 employees, I almost lost my mind. I'm like, I gave you this, and I'm like, and now you want another $1,300 from me? Screw you,
Yeah.
So
Oh, it's
I was
so
definitely
true.
emotionally hijacked this morning from my conversation with the IRS, but I'm okay now.
It's interesting. When I first started my business, I was like, I'm just going to do a Schedule C. I'm just going to be a normal LLC, do a Schedule C, and then I got hit with the self-employment tax, which was huge, and no amount of charitable giving overcomes that. It's an iron wall, it's a stone wall. You can't avoid the percentages there. And I was like, wow. I mean, I had to sell my rental property I had at the time. It was like my only investment to cover it. And I was like, well, if I'm an S Corp, I don't have to worry about that. You just got a whole other problems and paranoia when you're an S Corp. I actually wish I could just go back to being that Schedule C now. Like, I'll just pay the money. Like, I just want to know that they'll leave me alone. Like, I just want the IRS. I wish there was I bet there is one. I would like to take out an insurance policy against an audit. Right? Audit insurance. Does that exist?
It should. We should.
Probably doesn't exist because people would cheat on their taxes then. But like, that's all. I just want to know that if it happens, like, because they're going to get you. They're going to find some way that you're going to have to pay them, and then they're going to hit you with all the penalties on top of it. And even though you're trying to do everything right, they're merciless. Yeah. So I just would like to know that I have like $100,000 in an insurance policy somewhere to cover the IRS.
Exactly.
Anyway,
and sometimes it's not so bad, but like last year, the mistake was that she didn't do the 2018 fourth quarter. She didn't pay them or something. And when it came to May, we were finishing up the taxes, as we had an extension till September. I had to give them over $9,000. And then I get a letter saying I owe another $1,300 for that because of late fees, penalties, and interest, because I didn't pay those payroll taxes in a timely manner. I'm like, so in 5 months, you're telling me, technically I have till January to pay those taxes. I didn't pay them until May, so 4 months later. And you're telling me I owe you another $1,300 in interest and penalties from $9,000 for 4 months. Does that make any sense at all? I'm like, that's pretty exorbitant. I feel like that's a couple $100, okay, slap me with a couple hundred. But $1,300, that seems pretty exorbitant for only being 4 months late, paying only $9,000. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm. That
so
terrifies me.
it's terrifying. It is, because I told the guy, in my little rant, I was like, I mark my word, and I tell everybody this: if I ever go out of business, it's going to be because of you guys. It's going to be because of the IRS. The guy was laughing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Lots of people do. Lots of people do.
Hmm?
Lots of people. The IRS is not here to. They're not the SBA. They are not here to.
Nope.
To help us. Oh, look at that. David said there is a insurance, a variation of E&O.
Oh.
Committed by you or an employee.
Insurance call, yeah. It's not simply for tax preparers and tax preparation. Protects your business. So technically I could go after my CPA and get the money from her.
And they have insurance to cover that.
She
Interesting.
should have right. She should be covered by liability. Oh,
That's cool. Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
So if you were thinking about being an entrepreneur, don't. Okay, so next.
Take it from me and Thom. Don't do it.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I'd be an entrepreneur and just live in that. Again, I don't like, it's not like I have very few things that haunt me a little bit, you know what I mean? And not significantly, but I've in my self-awareness exercise, I've come to understand that I have a slight paranoia of the IRS and just bookkeeping and accounting in general. So what's empathy? So empathy is, did I skip motivation? No, growing and suffering. Okay. So empathy is, we're just going to go through the textbook definitions of this stuff real quick. Oh, there's motivation. Let's go back. We want to do motivation. These are out of order. All right. So what's motivation? Well, your typical definition of motivation is going to be wanting to do stuff, feeling like doing it. So we identify emotion or a motivation as being emotional. It means I feel like I want to do it. I'd like to change your definition of that. Because that's not real motivation. That's just desire, right? That's just emotion. Emotion is fleeting. That's a good thing, by the way, that you don't feel all the time from past events. So you can't feel motivated all the time on an emotional level. This is why motivational speakers make so much money. They get in front of an audience, they get you all amped up and you want to do it. Then people go home and they don't do it. Really what we need is more than the emotion. If we're always looking to our emotion to be the driver, well, we're going to fail. That's why I don't like motivational speakers. While motivation is good, I like to be able to amp myself up to do something. There is a certain amount of positive self-talk and excitement that helps. It's a lot of effort. If I think I have to feel something to do it, what have I become? But in a sense, I've made myself a slave to my emotions. Where in emotional intelligence, I'm actually trying not to be a slave to my emotions. I'm trying to allow my emotions to be there, positive or negative, and still make a rational response. So positive emotion is a good thing in the sense of it's helping us. We want to take those emotions, harness them, and drive them. But what about when you don't feel like doing it? Well, if we've harnessed ourselves to our emotions, now we're hosed. So you can see this all the time with fitness videos, right? They try to get you motivated. That's great. But what about when you don't feel like doing it? If you were relying on emotion to make you do it, you're definitely not going to do it. So what we need is a type of motivation that is actually more akin to discipline, wanting to defer immediate results for long-term success. It sounds like this. I know I don't feel like exercising right now, but I'm determined to do this anyway, so I can feel like not doing it, emotion coming through the filter, and still do it because I don't stop feeling like not doing it, but I simply filter out that influence and then I move it. To Luke's point, as Zig Ziglar famously said, do it and then you'll be motivated. What's he talking about there? He's talking about those pathways in the brain. The more you do something, the more likely you are to continue doing it. An object in motion stays in motion. So emotion is good as a kickstart. It's an ignition. But if you rely upon the emotion, you're hosed. And so my point is, guys, if you're saying, I just don't feel like doing something, therefore I don't, you've actually conditioned your brain to be irrational. and to be only emotional. So you'll only do it when you feel like doing it, and you just won't always feel like doing it. So instead, I want you to take the positive emotions and say, that's good, that's helpful, but I don't want to do it just for that reason. And I actually want you to do it when you don't feel like doing it. Well, how do I do that? Well, you have to be more emotionally intelligent. See, if your whole life has been not doing stuff, or recently maybe not doing stuff because you don't feel like it, what you've actually learned is maybe your score in emotional intelligence should be a little lower. It's not just about fight and flight, see? It's also about motivation. This is a conviction for a lot of people, myself included, because if I'm being honest, I tend to just want to do what I want to do. And I tend to try to feel like doing stuff. But I really want to do stuff even when I don't want to do it. You know what I mean? That's what I want to do. I want to eat healthy when I don't want to eat healthy. I want to exercise when I don't want to exercise. And this requires being rational and not emotional. But here's the thing. Emotional intelligence is this: doing it in spite of the emotion, not trying to remove the emotion. Identify the habits. This is how we start. You identify the habits you're challenged to form, and then you identify the emotions associated with them. Actually, some of you may remember Dr. Phil. Maybe you still watch him. Back in the, I think it was like the early 2000s, Dr. Phil wrote a book on weight loss that completely used emotional intelligence. And it took this science, and it wasn't about changing your emotional makeup. It was about doing things in spite of how you feel, by understanding your feelings and then becoming rational. One of the most brilliant books of weight loss. Of course, no one bought it. Not that many people bought it. We're not talking about it today, because what was popular today is still going to the weight loss clinic and getting the pill, or getting amped up, or going and buying something that's going to change everything. We're going to go buy this program, this treadmill, this piece of equipment. That's going to change the way we feel. No, well, only for a little while. We need a deeper conditioning. Phil addressed that. But that's not what we want to hear. So here is what we got to do. So this is the Dr. Phil approach, if you will, to changing your motivation. First, we got to get more self-aware. See, it goes back to the same process: self-awareness, self-regulation. Identify the habits you're challenged to form, and then the emotions associated with them. So, waking up early, exercising, eating healthy, whatever. Identify the habit. And then what's the emotion? So for me, the toughest thing for me to overcome is, and always probably will be, eating ice cream at night. Like I have become mentally addicted to ice cream at night. I just want to sit down on that couch and eat ice cream to end my day. I need it. It is a serotonin boost for me. It's just, everything is okay once I get there. Healthier than perhaps drinking myself into a stupor at night, but it is still a negative thing. It's impacted my weight. It's impacted my blood sugar. I don't sleep as well. I actually think I'm mildly allergic to something in it. So I can go abstinence, and I've done that. I can go abstinence and put no ice cream in the fridge, and after about 2 weeks, I don't crave it as I once did, but I haven't addressed what's occurring there. I've taken away what was helping, but I haven't replaced it with something else, right? So sometimes and I'm a one-legged stool, I'm extreme in everything. Sometimes in our extreme responses, we go from one ditch across the road into another ditch. We have to be careful of this. So sometimes you're better off just going to a low-fat ice cream, right? Or you're better off going to a smaller portion of ice cream, or having a smaller bowl so you can't even do anything. Or sometimes you're better off keeping it. Maybe a little vanilla ice cream at night isn't bad. Maybe I just need to be exercising beforehand, or maybe I need to eat it a little earlier in the evening before I go to sleep. Maybe I need to have that after dinner and then go for a walk. But we don't like to think that way. We tend to be perfectionists. We tend to be overachievers. By the way, overachievers are actually non-achievers, because overachievers say this: if I can't do it this way, this perfect way, I simply won't do it at all. So overachievers do nothing. Overachievers say, I won't work out unless I can work out 5 days a week. And then they just don't work out at all. Or they work out Monday, Tuesday, miss Wednesday, and give up on the rest of the week. Is this you? If this is you, then it's actually an issue of motivation. We need to learn that it's okay to do less more often. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to investigate why. Most of us just don't like that pride stomping solution of Take your time, slow, gradual changes because we want it now. So identify the habits you're challenged to form and the emotions associated with them. That's where we start. So if I'm challenged to form exercising every day, I can say, okay, what are the emotions associated with that? Well, I just don't feel like it. Well, you write all these things down, you journal them. And then what you say is, when those emotions come in, I'm going to identify them. I'm going to recognize them as real. I'm going to validate those emotions, but I'm going to choose to do the opposite thing in spite of them. And that's the fight you have to do. Instead of trying to harness the emotion or change the emotion, which is draining your resources and it's beating your head against the wall, instead I want you to allow the emotion and do a habit anyway. And what that's going to do is, in a feedback loop in your brain, it's going to come back and tell that emotional part of your brain, you didn't need to send up the alarm bells. We were okay. You didn't need to send the alarm bells. We were okay. Where we hurt ourselves is when we make the task impossible. Then the alarm bells were actually valid. See? Well, you went out and ran 5 miles and you hadn't worked out in a year. The next day you didn't feel like working out because you're sore. Yeah, that's wise. Your body needs to heal. So some alarm bells, some pain is wisdom, some pain is coming from the bad place. You need to filter these things out. And slowing down and taking your inventory does this. I don't feel like exercising today. Filter it out. Then just go walk a mile. Start changing that pattern of how you feel. The next day, you won't feel like working out. You go, well, I was able to walk a mile. That wasn't so bad. Alarm bells start getting a little lighter. I'm going to go out and join a gym and do all this major stuff. Maybe not a good response for reprogramming that brain. Hope this helps you understand what's going on here. This is, in a sense, so simple and yet so difficult for people to employ because we tend to not recognize the emotional intelligence that's going on. The alarm bells need to be understood so they can properly be filtered instead of reacting against them or trying to suppress them. And when you can understand that, this starts to become easier. It starts to become something you can put into practice and you start to see it as being true. Hopefully it helps you understand motivation. And then it just becomes simply strategic from there. Self-awareness to self-regulation strategy involving motivation, understanding the emotions, not trying to suppress them, or what most of us do is react against them. Stuff like cold turkey. When we actually need to think through it a little bit more and fight overachiever tendencies. Willpower is not something you can get so emotional that you can change. Emotion is like the emotion of motivation is like gas on a fire. Your willpower is the fire. So if you have a tiny little bit of fire, tiny little bit of willpower, and you pour emotion on it, emotional motivation on it as a form of gas, it flares up and then it dies right back down again. But you don't have enough gas to constantly be pouring on it. Okay? Triggered some of you guys on the milk issue already. Think about this, very, very important. I want you to think in terms of willpower and emotion are two separate things. Willpower and emotion are two separate things. Emotion is like gas, right? Willpower is like the flame. I want a bigger flame. If I pour gas on it, flames up, it comes right back down. Can't do that long term. You don't have an endless supply of gas. Stop looking to emotion. Change willpower. Willpower is generally very small, especially when you've been relying on fossil fuel, the gas fuels all day long. Willpower needs to have something stronger. Wood, right, needs something stronger. That takes longer to grow. So how do you do it? Well, you got to be honest with your willpower. Self-awareness. I have very little willpower. So you can do things like mini habits. Okay, it says that there, employ mini habits. What's a mini habit? A mini habit is like doing one push-up a day. Well, I want to work out, so I'm going to go buy this expensive program and I haven't worked out in a year. Probably not going to do it. Can you do 1 push-up a day? Well, that's ridiculous. I can do more than that. Okay, overachiever, do 1 push-up a day for a week. Even if you forget and you have to be reminded right before you go to bed, do 1 push-up. By the way, you'll probably do more than 1 push-up. There's a great book called Mini Habits, explores this. You'll probably do more than 1 push-up. But doing 1 push-up, that's it. Sounds ridiculous. Our rational brain says that's ridiculous. But have you done 1 push-up? Or have you done no push-ups? When's the last time you did any push-ups? And now you're saying you got to go do 100? You're going to go do a 100 push-up a day challenge? That's ridiculous. Why do that? It's an overreaction. It's fuel on a fire. It's not going to last. Okay? So what do you need to do? 1 push-up a day. What starts happening? You start realizing you can do that. And then slowly but surely, over time, the willpower grows. And look, there are people, you know them. They go out and they run 2 miles every day. For them, it's easy. They don't know what's wrong with us. So like, it's easy. That wasn't one day they just decided to pour fuel on the fire. The willpower changed and it got easier. Their willpower grew. Now they can't live without it. Point is, guys, a lot of us need to start with 1 push-up a day and grow the willpower and stop looking for fuel. That's emotional intelligence, understanding what's going on, what's emotional and what's will. Very, very powerful. And some of us need some true accountability. That's where we handcuff ourselves to it. Some of us, you're just never going to get enough willpower or emotion to do anything at all. So you need to like arrest yourself. You need to like cut yourself off from certain things or handcuff yourself to certain things. Like you need to, like when I was in boot camp, I worked out every day. I couldn't help it. That's true accountability. And sometimes those are good for a little while to kind of get drug along until the willpower starts to catch you up. Automatic savings accounts where your money is automatically deposited into savings, things like that is sometimes good when you just don't have the willpower, the personal discipline to do it. It's a good way to start. But even with that, start small. All right, so that's motivation, and we are coming in for a landing. If you're doing all of this and you're understanding your own emotions, you are just simply going to be able to understand what other people are going through more. If you want to be more empathetic, if you want to understand the emotions of others better and better relate to them, be more compassionate by a way of that, then the way to do it is to start doing it. Even if you don't feel like being compassionate towards someone else, or even if you don't feel like understanding or identifying with the emotions of others, you do it anyway. And the way empathy works, like willpower, is you do it until you want to do it. So I'm not naturally someone who really is a compassionate person. Really, I don't try to put myself down here in some weird way. Like cognitively, I care about people, but I'm not always like emotionally connected to other people as much as some other people that I know. I mean, intellectually, my core values are to care about people, but I don't always necessarily respond with compassion as some other people I know who just seem to love everyone so deeply. And I have to work on that. But what I've learned is as I've made the rational choice to take loving actions, I have then emotionally followed suit and become more compassionate. And that's how empathy works. I've worked with a lot of people that say, I want to care about my employees. I've protected myself. I trust people and I get hurt. So I just don't connect with people anymore. But empathy is recognizing that you can take those risks because in emotional intelligence, since you're becoming more emotional intelligence, you can take those risks and you're less likely to get as hurt in the same way. You might still feel hurt, but you can still move forward in spite of it because you're practicing emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is a great catalyst for developing relationships with people who will ultimately hurt you because you're able to function and do that. That doesn't mean you go out and get in every difficult relationship you possibly can. But a lot of people out there today say, well, don't get in don't know people because people are going to hurt you, or avoid all negative people. Well, then you have to avoid everybody. Only surround yourself by people that can help you and are positive. Well, good luck filling that friend circle. You know, the fact of the matter is that we need to be able to work with people who are troubled and down. We talked earlier, we started this call about helping the homeless. How can you help the homeless if your philosophy is to only be around positive people? You can't. But if you're emotionally intelligent, if you can go work with someone who doesn't even want the help and help them in spite of it, well, then you're incredibly able to make a real difference in the world. That's empathy. And that can only happen if it's built upon the self-awareness and self-regulation we've talked about, or else you're going to get too triggered to be able to do it. I hope you see that. You know, probably a lot of the people that have had a big impact in your life, a lot of the mentors that have had a big impact, they were taking a risk with you. Aren't you glad they did? Empathy is an important thing. Watch out for selfism, where it's all about self. Be careful as you only take emotional intelligence to the 50% mark, and you don't cross that barrier and start reaching out and helping others through the process. We use language with this. We say empathy is identifying with the emotions of others. So we say you don't necessarily have to feel what they're feeling, but you do have to call it out. You do have to be able to say, I can understand why you would feel that way, or I appreciate your feelings, because you're able to understand why they feel that way, even if you think they're wrong. Like the Grinch, we want to do the right thing, and our heart kind of grows in the process. It's the cart before the horse type of thing. That was my one Christmas reference, since we're almost there. And there's physical things we can do with this. We're not going to do this since we're not together in person today. We're going to bring this plane in for a landing. Finally, we end on social skills. Oops. Get the slideshow. I hate the slideshow. Triggered. So obviously, if you're self-aware, self-regulating, disciplined in your motivation, growing in empathy, able to understand the emotions of others, well, you're going to excel at social skills. You are now in an emotional intelligence place where you can actually implement leadership training and communication training. Guys, I've done sales training and leadership training for years. I've told people what to say, how to say it, when to say it, and then it comes time to say it and they don't say it. Why? They always say emotion got in the way. Well, if you have emotional intelligence, all the training you've ever received can be implemented. This is why I require emotional intelligence in every long-term training I do with any organization, because I can give them all the greatest tactics in the world. It doesn't matter if they don't have some level of EQ. You've probably spent your whole life the same way I have, learning how we ought to do things. I should exercise. I should eat this way. I should be in relationships this way. I should do all these things, but I don't. Well, when we become more emotionally intelligent, we can now take all of that wisdom we had, all that financial advice, all that stuff, and actually do it. That's the power of these social skills and this implementation. Emotional intelligence is the foundation where all training gets implemented. The DISC behavior language is a great way to do this. DISC is a language of behavior that helps you categorize how people different than you operate. People are the number one trigger of negative emotional responses. Other people, right? If everyone was just like you, we wouldn't have that problem, but they're not. And the problem is when people are complex. And so when we're sitting there working with someone that's complex, we're more likely to get triggered if we're trying to analyze everything. DISC simplifies behavior. It says some people are extroverted, some people are introverted, some people are more task-oriented, some people are more people-oriented. And you can learn this language. I encourage you to go out and learn it. I've got videos on my YouTube channel. It walks you right through how to do it. You can go to my YouTube channel. I have a playlist on DISC. You can learn DISC in about 30 minutes there. And go and use it. And you'll find out that you're probably overreacting to people that are just transmitting through the transmission frequency they want to use. And when you look at that rationally, it allows you to respond emotionally intelligent. Also, some of us just need to force ourselves to engage in social settings. Sometimes we just need to get out there and, you can't become more emotionally intelligent if you don't experience some level of trial. So for many of you flight people, you got to get out there and talk to people that you don't want to talk to. And what you need to do when you're in the social setting is don't retreat back into yourself. Obviously, you're going to practice your emotional intelligence training, but if you're more focused on other people than yourself, it becomes much easier. When you make it about them and not about you, it actually becomes much easier to be emotionally intelligent in social settings. And active listening is the easiest way to do this. So in active listening, you repeat back to people what you heard them say in your own words. So you'll say, what I hear you saying, Kristen, is that the IRS is a major point of stress in your life. So you say that back to them when you don't know what to say. You just actively listen. And then people will hear what they just said to you, kind of reflect back, and they correct the story. So instead of responding with words. We respond with active listening. And it's a great way to grow closer to people without ever having to actually give an opinion whatsoever. All right. Two states. We're bringing it in for a landing. 5 minutes left. And I'm going to shut up. 2 states that you can ever be in emotional intelligence. This is textbook emotional intelligence here. You've got what's called the approach state. You know what that's like. You like people like that. It's not just being happy and positive. It's just approachable. And the avoid state, people who aren't approachable. It's not just angry versus happy. It's just approachable versus not approachable. When you're a emotionally intelligent person, people will find that your very presence makes them feel safe, feel well-adjusted, feel understood. And it takes time of interacting with people this way. When you're in the approach state, science tells us you are more likely to bring other people to the approach state. So if you go, well, I'm fine, but everyone around me is angry, maybe you're not fine enough, because science proves that if you are in the approach state, people are much more likely to come to the approach state by your mere presence. So maybe you're in the approach state right now, but if you are, here's the catch, consistently in the approach state, your very presence will put people at ease, and I'm sure you've met people like that. I can be in the approach state pretty significantly. But am I consistently like that at home? When I walk through the door, do my kids relax? Or are they going, is this good daddy or bad daddy? Right? So it's about not just being in the approach state, but being consistently in the approach state. When you're in the avoid state, you're more likely to bring people to the avoid state. It's an oil and water issue here. But the approach state is more attractive to people. And here's the benefit. If you are in the approach state and people in the avoid state aren't transitioning to the approach state because of you, well, at least you get to stay in the approach state. You don't have to deal with their crap, right? That's the goal. Laria said she missed the last bullet on social skills. I don't know what it was. Active listening. Learn active listening. And there's great stuff out there on that. My YouTube channel has stuff on trust building that involves active listening. So if you go like how to build trust with people, I think is the video. And this is what leadership is. So great leaders aren't just trying to make everybody like them all the time. They're actually deeply involved with improving all of these things all the time. Matter of fact, some of the greatest leaders I've ever met, you would look at them and go, man, is there anything wrong with that person? They seem to always be in the approach state. But if you really get to know them, they're working on themselves. What's above the water on the iceberg might look good, but underneath the water, they're still doing a lot of work. They're still doing a lot of work. All right. So you can find me on social medias, stuff like that. Let's move to a break. I know we only went 30 minutes since our last break, but we're going to transition now to time management. I have talked your ears off for 2.5 hours. And we got more to go. So I want to take a break here. I want to go take a break till 11:45, and we'll come back and do time management. I will put that social media slide back up. Yeah, it doesn't have the YouTube on there. I will put that back up. Kristen said. While we're on this long break till 11:45, I'm happy to take any questions you have about anything at all. I don't care. I'll try not to get triggered. Any questions related to emotional intelligence or anything? You can unmute and ask.
Question for
you.
you.
Go ahead.
So all of my students are, out of work, looking for work, and going through, the training, and then getting prepared for, job placement and interviewing. And a lot of the times interviewing causes great anxiety, to the point, and you've probably seen this, to the point where, when we do the mock interviews, even some of the students just get so nervous, even on the mock interviews, that they fail the interview miserably, even though I know them. I know they would be the perfect person for the job. the questions I ask, they're not really answering. So it's like they kind of have an out of body experience where, you know, they get asked the question and then they talk so much because they're so nervous because they don't know what questions are going to be thrown at them, which we'll go back to preparing. But other than that, that sometimes it causes so much anxiety that they could be the perfect person for the job, but they fail the interview and then they don't get the job. Is there a way to overcome, other than, you know, preparing, which, you know, we go through all the steps to prepare well for interviews and stuff like that, but just emotionally, it's, you know, a lot of times it's out of desperation. You know, I need that paycheck, I need that job. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So you got any advice on that?
Yeah. So textbook emotional intelligence issue. What we typically do in that situation is we say, I need to stop being nervous. That's problem number one.
Yeah.
You're nervous. It's okay. So what happens is that amplifies our nerves. When we walk into an interview and we say, I need to stop being nervous, we think now we're screwing it up already before it's even begun because we're nervous. We think that's wrong.
Right.
You got to stop doing that. Of course you're nervous. Of course you're nervous. You're excited. By the way, your body doesn't know the difference between nervous and excited. Biologically, it's the same feeling. Your brain is qualifying what you're feeling as nerves. But if you're being honest, it's a little bit of both. You're eager, you're hopeful,
yeah,
you're excited, and you're nervous.
Yeah.
Before I get on any stage and talk to a bunch of people, people go, do you get nervous? I go, I get excited. What do I think about? I think about what I want to say. I focus on the thing that matters. But I don't care that I'm nervous because I'm not going to make that go away. I'm just aware of it. But what we do when we think about I need to stop being nervous is now we're focused on being nervous. So I don't want you to stop trying to be nervous at all. I just want you to focus on something else. And that can't happen until you've accepted the nerves. So it starts there. So before you walk into that interview, this is what you say. I feel some nerves right now because I really want this to go well. But I know what they need to know about me is this, this, and this. The reason I'm nervous is because I'm so excited about this opportunity. And the reason I'm excited about this opportunity is this reason, this reason, this reason. And I'm going to focus on that. So then you walk in and now it's a engaged nerve, right? So now we're harnessing emotions. So you walk in and you sit down and you say, guys, if I could just start off by saying, I'm so excited to be here. And I'm excited and a little nervous too, because I'm excited. And it's because I really just think that this job is a fit for me. Just get that out there, right? What people do instead is they walk in, they go, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Don't do that. Don't walk in and say, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Don't be sorry to be nervous. Be nervous. Don't even walk in there and say, I'm just really nervous. Walk in there and say, I'm excited about how, because and a little nervous too, because I really believe I'm the right fit for this job. And I've just been really looking forward to this opportunity. And then focus on those elements. Focus on those things. Every time you start to feel the nerves, you go, this is such a big opportunity because I'm the right fit, because I'm the right fit, because I'm the right fit. They ask questions. I'm so glad you asked that because this is exactly why I believe I'm the right fit. So I'm so excited to be here, this, and this. And you know what? They're going to hear that over and above the obvious presence of your nerves. And likely 10 minutes into the interview, as they begin to resonate with those things, the nerves go away.
I've actually looked at it. Tom's talking about thinking of it as being excited when you were talking about people asking you how it feels going on stage in front of everybody. I look at it as, okay, I'm getting up there because I'm getting ready to perform in front of everybody. Yeah, I've got butterflies in my stomach because I want people to like this performance.
Exactly.
And
that's huge.
That's the way I look at it. I look at it as, if you've ever been in drama, if you've ever been in anything where you know you're going to be acting in front of people, drama, dance, singing, any of that, I literally have to look at it as if I am going in and being a totally different person. Because in essence, when you're on a job, you are in essence a totally different person than you are when you're at home. Literally, right. You have to look at it as if that's the job you want, you have to look at it as if, okay, I'm going to walk in as if I already am an employee in this place, and I want to show them that I want to go higher. That's the hard part about it a lot of times, is trying to, especially when you've gotten turned down so much and stuff, you have to kind of psych yourself into going, okay, I know I can do this. I've done the skills with it. I've learned the skills. Hey, I've learned the skills with Kristen and Thom. I got this. They've told me I got this, or they wouldn't have given me the papers saying that I got it. So I think that's huge.
And there's a slight difference between what I would call delusional thinking and focusing on what's real, right? Like, I don't want, like, for example, I have to lead some music at my church on occasion, right? Right now we don't have someone doing it, so I know I am not a great singer, right? And I can focus on that and sing worse. So what you have to kind of do is focus on what's real. Like, what's real is that I want to do it. What's real is that there's a reason why I'm doing it. There's a purpose in what I'm doing there. And if you focus on that purpose, then you can kind of forget yourself in the process.
Right.
So focus on what matters, forget you. Focus and forget. Focus and forget. So it's exactly that self-talk you're talking about. I want to be here. I know this is a huge opportunity. These people will make a huge mistake if they miss me. And I'm going to go in there, and even if they choose not to choose me, I'm going to give them all the best I have. And I'm excited about that. And when I feel nervous, that's fine, but I'm focused in on this excitement. And that can only happen when you allow the nerves to be there. And so that doesn't make it easy, by the way. You're still gonna come off. You're gonna have biological indications of nerves, but instead of trying to hide that, or you allow that.
Kristen can tell you.
And focus on what happens.
Kristen can tell you. My mock interview with her and Camille was literally, we only had 5 minutes for the whole thing because of all the technological crappy difficulties we were having between all of our systems for some reason. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, all of these technological difficulties, and they're only going to be able to ask me one question. And I don't know if she's hearing this, but wow, she totally surprised me the next day when she goes, out of all of you, she said, kudos to Illyria, because she's the only one that did what I was expecting in that interview out of every last one of you right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know,
and the reason
she did her 3-step pitch. That's what she did.
Yeah, I was gonna say preparation really matters there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had 2 or 3 of those 3-step pitches ready, and she said everybody else it was like their pitches just went out the window. Yeah. They just totally lost it.
I got very few 3-step pitches that day, and I was specifically looking for that when I said, "Tell me about yourself." So Illyria's like,
"You got to know what you're going to say."
Do you want another one? I'm like, okay. So
I think that's the big thing with the interview. I mean, the 3-step pitch doesn't save you from the nerves, right? The focus on the right things does, but the 3-step pitch then gives you how to respond. Like, you can go in there with all that great self-talk we're talking about and still get marbles in your mouth, say something stupid, and then all of a sudden it's amplified again, you're triggered. So you want to go in with all that positive self-talk, focusing on the right things, But then you got to go in and know what to say, at least for 30 seconds, right? You have to have that commercial. You're not going to be able to know what to say question after question after question. So this is why I'm a big fan of the 3-step pitch. And I like to use it early. I like to sit down. They say, hey, how are you? And you're like, I'm excited to be here. I've really been looking forward to this opportunity. Can't wait for you guys to get to know me a little bit and me to get to know you a little bit. Memorize that. Memorize that. Because while you're nervous, you're now saying what your brain doesn't have to process, saving resources. You say your intro. The hardest part with flying a plane is not when it's in the air. It's takeoff and landing. Same with giving public speeches. Same with interviews. Know how you're going to take off, know how you're going to land, and have a 30-second commercial in there. So at some point, they're going to say, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Oh, good. I'm not focused on saying it how I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it. I'm focused on why, focused on why, focused on why. That works. Now, that's opposed to convincing yourself of something that isn't real. That's delusion. We can take positive self-talk to something that's not real. What I want you to do is focus on what is real, but focus on it. And nerves will still be there, but they won't impact things the same way.
Right.
Appreciate you coming on like this is my podcast. Appreciate you coming on the show, sharing that. This looks like my podcast.
Are we back from break, everybody?
We're back.
We're back. All right. Thom, take it away. All right. So are we switching gears to the time management?
Yeah.
So did you, I did send you a little message earlier saying if you need more time to continue with the emotional intelligence, then we can do that, and we can do the time management. We can schedule it for another day, within the next couple of weeks if you want.
Now let's go through some time management.
Okay.
What I want to do, honestly, is I'd like to go through time management in about, because I'm here till 1, I'd like to go through time management till 12:15. I'd like to do it in 30 minutes and then allow 45 minutes for us to interact, have some questions regarding all of these things. We can talk about interviewing. We can talk about nerves. We can talk about entrepreneurship. We can talk about time management. Time management is best when people are saying, this is what I got going on. So I think if we can turn this into group coaching for the last 45 minutes, talking about the things we've talked about, we'll get more people with more success stories than me lecturing for an additional 45 minutes.
Sounds good.
If not, then I'll keep lecturing.
Okay.
So let's talk about, let's get this out of the way, if you will, because here's the thing about time management. I've been training time management now for a decade. And I started off in the first 8 years of that time management was all, here are the best methods for time management. And over that time, I was training on that. I was trying to help my clients to implement it. So it's easy to get up and say, here's how you ought to be, and here's some great principles. But then you leave people to do it. And a lot of people come back and say, this is hard. So I was getting paid to work with people and help them actually do it. What I found as I was doing that was they weren't ready for time management because they had too much time debt. It's kind of like financial planning. I could give you all the, not that I could, but somebody out there could give you all the best financial advice in the world. It doesn't really matter if you owe $100,000 and you only have $2 additional income a month to spend somewhere. How much investing are you really going to do? So why would we talk about that? Shouldn't we talk about getting out of debt? That's why you take guys like Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey does talk a little bit about financial planning and investments, but 95% of what he talks about is getting out of debt. Because what good is financial planning for people in debt, right?
Yeah, he has
kind of
financial
the same with
peace.
time management.
He
Go
has
ahead.
the Financial Peace University. Dave
Yeah.
Ramsey has
Yeah,
the Financial Peace University, and I've
Yep,
done
that's
that
the guy.
course. He starts talking
And
about
all-
how you work with it before he talks about how you before he talks about how to invest in it. His
And that's
investment class
key.
is advanced.
So what you have to have is you have to get out of debt before you can get into financial investing. You got to get out of time debt before you can get into time management. And while the principles apply, the getting out of debt principles apply to financial planning, and the getting out of time debt principles apply to time management, we all have to start there. So I spent 8 years teaching people how to do time management, and then tried helping them apply and couldn't real well. I got results with people, but only really people who were already kind of ready. And what I realized is we need to get people out of overwhelm. We need to get them out of time debt before we can really get them to leverage their time. We have to, as Dave says, you have to live like no one else in order to one day live like no one else. And this is so true with time management. So what I want to find out is where you guys are at. I'm going to take a little quiz. So on a scale of 1 to 10, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to answer each of these. 10 is most, 1 is least. So I feel overwhelmed most of the time. Are you closer to 1? I don't really ever feel overwhelmed. Closer to 10. The 10 people are going to come in fast, right? Where are you guys at? This will help me gauge how much I'm barking up the right tree with this training too. Sam's a 10, but she lives with Kristen.
No, I don't. I moved out. I'm a grown up.
Oh, what's your problem?
I'm even more overwhelmed.
Don't you drop your laundry off?
Oh, I wish.
She drops her dogs
Kristen,
off, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You want the dogs.
Kristen, are you baking cookies this year?
Yes.
I'll be by.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Tom, thank you for the mug too, by the way.
You're welcome.
That was very nicely unexpected. It's very cute. Tom gave me a
It's
mug
too
for
small,
you guys
but I like the
did
mug.
his 3-step pitch class, which talks about core values and stuff. He sent me a mug that says coffee is one of my core values. So very cute.
Doesn't really help with
That
overwhelm,
was
by the
awesome.
way. So a lot of 10s. And you know what's interesting is, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter sometimes how much you have going on, right? My grandmother, retired, is one of the most overwhelmed people I know. And she's got more time to spend than I do. And so it's not always a matter of time. Sometimes it's a matter of emotional intelligence. That's why I led with emotional intelligence. Some of us are merely overwhelmed because we're triggered. Some of us are overwhelmed because we got too much going on, right? Patricia said it, hit the nail on the head. She just puts things off. It's interesting. So I got a lot going on right now, and I had to end a lot of, actually had to stop a lot of my client relationships so I could focus on some education stuff I'm doing right now. And it freed up my time, and that helped. But I've already kind of maximized that time. I'm already starting to feel overwhelmed again. And this is something called Parkinson's principle. We're going to get into this in a minute here. All right. So there's a lot more questions. We're going to move a lot faster now. I have more plans than time, 1 to 10. I have more plans than time. I want to do more than I can do. This is me at the buffet. I got more appetite than stomach. This is me Thursday. All right. History tells me, we're using emotional intelligence here if you haven't noticed. This is a self-awareness exercise. History tells me I am doing too much. Scale of 1 to 10. Are we listening to the alarm bells? History tells me I'm doing too much. I miss or cancel appointments last minute. Not because you're quarantined, because you can't do it. I miss or cancel appointments last minute. I need a break, but I don't have the luxury. I don't have the luxury. So we had a lot of ones on, so I think that miss or cancel appointments one. I'd be like, well, I don't do that. I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing too much. I got more plans than time, but I ain't missing appointments. And finally, I need money. This is a complex one. So pay attention to this one. I need money, so I spend time to get it, work, whatever, and I can't get ahead. I need money, I spend time to get it, but I still can't get ahead, which to me is the most textbook being stuck that most people find themselves in. We work hard for the money, but we can never seem to get ahead. The reason I put that one there is I want you to think of time in the same way as you think of money. How we think about time is the most important part to getting out of overwhelm. If you have $100, you can only spend $100. Now you could go get more money. You could go beg, borrow, or steal for more money. But if you have $100, you can only spend $100. And most people are aware of how much money they have. Most people know exactly how much money they have and how much they need to have. We're always doing that accounting in our head. Hey, I need $3,000 to get through the month. I got $2,500 coming in. I got to find $500 somewhere. And we spend time to get that. But very few people think of time in that way. We don't think of, I have 168 hours in the week. I know I'm going to spend 80 hours sleeping. I know I've got 40 hours in a work day. You know, we don't really think of our time in that way. The difference, of course, between time and money is you can't beg, borrow, or steal time. Everybody has the same amount of time. And that's actually what I like about time, is time is the great game changer. I have as much time as Bill Gates. I have as much time as the president. I have as much time as all of you. There's nothing I can do to get more time. I could have a team of people working for me. I could spend money to have other people doing stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm only able to accomplish what I'm able to accomplish. And I love studying people who use their time well. And I always find a connection between their time and their emotional intelligence. I've got a couple of writers that I just really love. I mean, these guys are writing like 2 or 3 books a year, some of them even 6 to 10 books a year. And they still have pretty good family lives, and they still kind of exercise. I'm like, how do you do it? Do you just have a lot of money and you can just wake up every day and do what you want? Do you have demands on your life? A lot of them have tremendous demands on their life. I'm like, how do you do it? It's interesting when we start thinking about our time as our greatest resource and not our money. A lot of us, in seeking money, have put ourselves in a time debt, and we get stuck. So let's get real. The reality is you have 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week, and 365 opportunities a year. The deception is that we will make time or get around to it when we're freed up. Absolutely never going to happen. The reality is you likely won't be able to do everything you want to as fast as you want to. We have to expect obstacles. The deception is you can, so you don't need a plan. Optimism sometimes is not our friend. The reality is that you're actually limited. The deception is it'll be different this time. So you see, self-awareness, though it may be realistic and not optimistic, maybe even sound pessimistic, actually helps us in getting real. If you've ever sat with a financial planner, they're very good at bursting every bubble you have in your life. They keep telling you, why aren't you planning for retirement already? You really need to be planning for that now. We're like, it'll be fine when we get there. They're like, no, you don't understand. You need to get real. It's kind of the same with our time. We need to get real. Thinking one day we're suddenly going to have all this time is not really the way to go about doing it. We really need to get margin now, especially if we're stuck. So is there any hope? Solutions to time management issues a lot of times look good on paper. A friend of mine just wrote a book on time management. It's getting ready to get re-released. I know him. I know how he does, or it's getting ready to get released. I know how he does his time management. And I can tell you right now, love the guy, but it's very unlikely that most people are going to be able to implement his system because this guy's a machine. He's a machine. And so his day looks awesome, but it's just most people can't do it. We're not engineers, and he's got an engineering mind. My wife recently read a book on time management in the home. She homeschools the kids, and she's doing everything here, and she helps me a lot. She's just got so much she's got going on. She's way busier than me. And she read this book and she started time blocking everything, 15 minutes here. She calendars all over the wall, doing all this stuff. And it all looked great on paper. She got 2 days in and it just fell apart. Because you just can't keep the train on the tracks like that in a reactive world. People that are in proactive world, they have complete control over their day, are totally in a different situation than many of us who are reactive all day. So the time management books tell you to plan every 5 minutes are great, but they're built for a machine that isn't you if you're in a reactive world. So we got to change our mindset. And if what we know is I need a lot of opportunity to react and respond, I need to be more responsive, or else I get overwhelmed, then you know what you need? Margin. What's that? Blank space on your calendar. You actually need to fight for nothing. How do we do it? I'm going to give you some things we need to rethink here. How are we doing on time? 15 minutes. Here we go. I'm going to stop reading the chat for a minute so I can focus on this. All right. Prioritization is not ranking everything you want to do from 1 to 100 and then starting with 1. Okay, I want us to rethink what prioritization is. And this is going to be radical because this is written for people in overwhelm, and many of you are. True prioritization is ranking things in 1 to 10 and cutting off the rest. Cutting off the rest. Again, appeal here to Dave Ramsey, right? Cut up them credit cards. Stop using them thinking it's going to be different this time. Cut them up, pay them off, never use them again. That's radical. Radical. Prioritization is the same way. We go, well, I want to do everything, and I'll just make sure I focus on the important stuff first, but we never get to the other things, but they're draining our resources. We need to just say, here's what I'm going to focus on and nothing else, until I have margin. And this is really hard for people to do. Really hard for people to do. We have a real hard time letting go of everything. Prioritization is the solution, but it's not 1 to 100. It's probably 1 to 10. It's interesting. We talk a lot about goal setting. You know, I've only got like 5 goals a year now. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to have 100% success. I'd love to do 1,000 things. It just never worked for me. Now, I could improve my 5 to 10, and I could take my 10 goals and make it to 15. But taking my 15 to 50, not wise. All right, number 2. Time blocking is for engineers and project managers. Probably step on a few toes here. I do time block. I do it differently. I'm going to show you how I do it. The rest of us need sustained momentum. If you are like most people I've coached over the past 10 years, and you say my problem is consistency, then I'm more concerned about getting you consistent on a couple of things than I am upon you trying to change your whole way that you operate. You can't change how you operate overnight. Slow, consistent things. So I want to focus on you getting some momentum and slowly grow that momentum instead of saying, I'm going to make myself into a robot. Because very few people can become robotic. If you are an engineer or project manager mindset and you can time block and that's working for you and you've proven it's worked for you and you've been consistent doing it, then keep doing it. For the rest of you who have tried that and it hasn't worked, you need a different solution. You're not left-brained, you're right-brained, whatever it is. All right, rethink number 3. Multitasking is impossible for humans. It's actually a distraction. Many of you on your resumes at the top say multitasking. I actually laugh when people send resumes to me or my clients and I see it says multitasking at the top. I go, that's funny. They must be very distracted. I know why they put that. It sounds good. We've accepted it. But we actually invented computers to do this for us because we knew we couldn't. What humans can do that computers can't is be creative. We can have, when we focus, we increase our resources in our brain. If you have 10 tabs open on your browser and you're doing 5 things at once. It might feel productive. It might feel efficient. And in a sense, it might have some level of efficiency, but you're suppressing you from your greatest ability, which is focus and creativity. I'll give you an example. I know people who work hard all week doing 1,000 things, multitasking, sending emails, having meetings, giving instructions, working on projects all week long. And at the end of the week, they're like, man, that was a lot. I don't really feel like I accomplished anything. Saturday morning, they come into the office for 4 hours and they get more done in that 4 hours than they had done all week. Why? Focus. Focus. So in 4 hours, you did more than you'd done all week. Why aren't we trying to have that focus every day? Why do we accept distraction and call it efficient multitasking? It's illogical. We've got to rethink. Got to rethink this. How do we do it then? Well, here's a couple of quick strategies. First of all, go ahead and rank your priorities for 2021. What are your priorities for the year? Accomplish only what can be calendared with certainty, allowing for margin. Don't block every 15 minutes to get everything done. Take your calendar, take your priorities, and write everything down and allow plenty of time. One simplistic way of doing this is only seek to accomplish 3 important things a day. Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach has been training his clients on that for over 30 years. Only do 3, not just 3 things, because waking up, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, and eating breakfast, you've already accomplished 3 things. Only accomplish 3 important things that relate to your goals at max a day. So when you calendar, you say, these are my goals, my priorities for the year. As long as I'm not doing more than 3 things towards those a day, no willpower problem. And I'm allowing margin, because if I say I don't have 5 minutes of wiggle room and something occurs I didn't expect, I end up sacrificing my priorities. Strategy is accomplish only what can be calendared with certainty, allowing for margin, allowing for buffer time. Go ahead and plan out the next month. You're going to find you can do a lot less than you had hoped, but you'll do a lot more than you otherwise would have. So let's do some of that now. I want you to rank your life's priorities. Okay, let's find out what's truly important to you. And this is personal, it's private, you don't have to share it in the chat, but I want you to go ahead and write this down. So here are the 8 categories that all of life can be put into. So you've got your business or your work, business, work, same thing. Finances or money, same thing. Health, and there I just mean physical health. I guess you could call it mental health as well. I'd put mental health probably more under the next category of faith or spirituality. Then you've got family. You've got your friends, your social life. You've got education. And then you've got community or social causes. Pretty much everything that you care about or would do an activity under falls under these things. Now, a lot of life is doing things as a means to an end. I must work to make money so I can eat and have health, right? So I can feed my family. But is work the most important thing to you? So sometimes the way things are different than the way things should be. And this requires sacrifice. So to help us do this self-awareness exercise, rank your priorities, your categories as they should be, according to your heart, scale of 1 to 8. Now, as you're doing that, for those of you who get that done, is that how it is? Or is that how it should be? Is that how it is? Or is that how it should be? It's always going to be a little out of order. That's life. But what we really want is your top 3 categories of how it should be to be how it is. And this is where the challenge comes. Let's say family is your number 1, but work is just really dominating, or education, school is really dominating life right now. Like maybe you're in a season where you're going to allow that to happen, but do you know when that season is going to end? Or are you just hoping one day it will end? If you know when it's going to end, if you're controlling the season, fine. But if you don't know and you're just hoping, you're living contrary to your priorities. Eventually, this is going to cause overwhelm. But Thom, then I'll have to sacrifice school. I'll have to sacrifice work. I'll have to sacrifice money. I'll have to sacrifice. I know. But this is what we have to do. We have to live according to our priorities, sacrificing other things so that what we do accomplish is what matters, even if we accomplish less overall. And living that way will give you momentum and focus and a well-being that otherwise is usually delusional. If I had more time to focus on that, we would. Let's move to strategy number 2. Never leave a meeting, task, or conversation that you want to continue open-ended. And this is a big one on distractions, especially for people in management and sales. So let's say you're having a conversation with someone. I'm talking to Kristen, and she says, hey, Thom, we should talk about this or that some point in time. And I go, okay, sounds good. And then we don't schedule the next meeting. And we all are guilty of this. You're talking to a relative. We should talk more often. You're talking to a friend. We should catch up more. Good intentions, good intentions, good intentions. That's like throwing the ball out there, and we don't know when it's going to come back. Guess when it comes back? Well, they all come back at the same time. Overwhelm. Overwhelm. Instead, if there's ever a meeting or a task or a conversation that you actually want to continue in your life with some sort of permanency, you always set a DDT. What's a DDT? An appointment, a day, date, and time. It's just an appointment. So if I'm talking to Kristen and she says, we should get together on this or that. All right, let's go ahead and calendar it now. And you go, well, I don't have enough information to set the appointment yet. No problem. Just set a phone call or a day, date, and time to come back to it. Me and one of the guys I work with, his name is Jens. He lives in Miami. We always have good ideas going on. And one of the things we're good at doing is, even though we might not implement everything we're planning on doing, we always set a day, date, and time in the future to come back to it. We've had a couple of things we've been kicking down the road for a while, but you know what? I know in 30 days, I'm going to have another conversation. We're going to see what we have accomplished. And we've always done some sort of baby step, but we're always keeping it in front of us. So eventually it does get done. We're not having to ever start over. It's wonderful. We always have a day, date, and time. It's just a great way to live. So you're having a conversation with someone and they say, we should do this or that next year. Hey, I know we're not ready to do that yet or commit to that, but why don't we go ahead and plan a call for 45 days to just review this for 5-10 minutes. And between now and that 45 days from now, let's figure out what we're going to do in between. It's a form of accountability. Never leave it open-ended. It's okay to say no. Say no to the things you don't want to do. Say DDT to the things you do want to do. This will transform your life. How do you say it? I get this all the time. I run into people, right, with interruptions. You're walking somewhere and someone sees you. Oh, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever. Hey, I'm doing great. Happy to see you as well. I'd love to catch up more, but I don't want to get stuck in conversation for an hour, right? So I tell them right up front, I'd love to catch up more, but I only have about 3 minutes until the next thing I got to get to. Can we schedule time to catch up? Sure. We talk for 3 minutes and we schedule the day, date, and time. Now, I don't want to use this to blow people off. If I'm on my way to something and I don't have time for the interruption, I'm just being honest with them right up front. I've got to get to something. Even if that thing is an appointment with myself, I got to get there, right? But I do care about this person. I want to give them some time. So I tell them the time I can give them. And if I want to have more time with them, I tell them right up front, let's set the appointment before the 5 minutes is over. Hey, I've got about 5 minutes to spend right now, Barb. Why don't we catch up? But then let's set a date and time to get together again. Well, what about when we don't want to get together again? What about when they really just are interrupting us? Well, we want to be kind to people. Give them a couple minutes. But again, we say it right up front. Hey, it's so great to see you. I'm on my way to something. I've got about 5 minutes. Why don't we use that time to catch up now? Sorry, I'll just use the script. Hey, I'm doing great. Happy to see you as well. I'd love to catch up. Got about 10 minutes where I need to head out. Can we use that time to catch up a bit, or are you in a hurry as well? Sure, we can do 10 minutes. See how I flip that back on them? And then if after that you want to schedule more time to catch up with them, do. But if not, don't. Right? It's pretty simple. All right, third strategy, block time instead of tasks. types of time. So live life in momentum. The human being is not a good multitasker, but we are good at creativity and momentum. So when I time block, I only time block types of time, not tasks. Not I'm going to do this at 11 o'clock, I'm going to do this at 3 o'clock, I'm going to do this, because that has me changing gears too often. Instead, I would rather say I'm going to spend all day Monday doing administrative work, planning, decluttering, projects. I plan an admin day, or I plan an admin 2 hours. It has to always be at least 2 hours. I plan admin blocks. I plan rest time as a block. That's time where I don't multitask, just resting, switching off devices, switching off work, just focusing on rest. I plan build time. So in business, this is selling or networking or working. I plan build time, and I plan serve time. That's client time. So of course, I've written this kind of with entrepreneurs in mind. You can figure out your own blocks, but for me, it has always been admin, rest, build or sales or growth time, and then service time, meeting my commitments. And I put these in large blocks. So my clients are typically all together on the same day. My admin is all together on the same day because it's a type of momentum. When I'm in admin time, I've got classical music on, you know, I'm enjoying some soda, tea, water, whatever. I'm in my slippers. It's admin focus. Everything else is turned off. When I'm client time, I'm switched on. I'm completely focused on them. And I don't have, this is the important thing, I don't have the subconscious stress that I'm going to have to figure out when I'm going to get my stuff done, because I've already planned my admin time. So as emails are pouring in, as they have been for the past 3.5 hours, as emails are pouring in, I'm not worried about it. I've already got my admin time planned. Now I do have an admin block for 1 hour at the beginning and end of every day. So from usually 8 to 9 a.m. and usually 5 to 6 p.m., that's email time, that's admin time, it's checking my calendar, making sure I know what's going on, getting situational awareness. So I don't worry about it. If emails, my phone's sitting here vibrating like crazy the whole time we're doing this, bzz, 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 no stress. I know when it's going to happen. Already know when it's going to happen. I know when things come up, people ask me if I can do things. I've got time blocks. Even if I don't have anything to put in them, I already know when I'm going to do it. Now, sometimes it just doesn't work. I go, well, how about we meet on Thursday? That's when I meet with people. And they go, I can't meet Thursday. Well, sometimes I got to make an exception to the rule, but I always start, not by saying, you tell me what's best for you. I always start by trying to put it in these momentum blocks. Days all day focused on people, days all day focused on admin, days all day focused on rest, or at least large 2 to 4 hour blocks. This works. This is manageable. Speaking of time management, I've gone over a couple minutes, but we're almost there. We also have to attack our distractions. Ultimately, if we're in overwhelm and we're in time debt, all this time management talk, all this time blocking is great, but if we don't attack distractions, we're hosed. Even good distractions must go if they're not aligned with your mission. If they're not aligned with your priorities, it must go. Look, it's good for me to enjoy a good book once in a while. It's healthy. It's good for me to have social interaction. It's healthy. And I should plan for those things. But at the end of the day, if they're taking me off my priorities, I've got to focus on my priorities, even good distractions. So you really need to make a list of common distractions, AKA time wasters. And that's anything that causes you to spend a lot of time doing what is unnecessary or doesn't produce any benefits. I know we're over time, but jump into the chat and I'd like to see what your time wasters are. Now we have to be careful. Don't assume your time wasters are everybody's time wasters. People are quick to say social media. Well, I use social media for my business. When I'm using it for my business, it's not a distraction. But here's the catch. Am I using it for my business when I should be doing other work? Or have I planned my social media time as a part of my admin work? And am I doing it then? So what can be a time waster depends on when and how it's being used. So think about that. A lot of times we're extreme. We say TV. Well, is some TV time good? Did you plan on watching TV at that time? Is it too much, too little? I think an hour of TV a day is probably not a bad thing, but it depends on you, right? So you have to qualify your time wasters. So put your time wasters in there, but give them a little qualification. Social media when? TV when? How can you make it positive? When could you be doing it planned? Social media is a good one. There was a period of time in my life when I had a time block on my calendar of social media. Saturday morning, I would wake up, I'd go on Facebook, go on LinkedIn, go on Twitter, go on Instagram, see what everybody had done all week on social media, kind of catch up, make comments, connect with people there. It was like an hour of social time, hour and a half of social time on social media, and turned it off again for the rest of the week. Worked really well for me. No notifications, didn't care. Saturday morning, I did social media. That was very healthy for me. Some people, they have to have abstinence. Some good stuff in there. Some of us need to go extreme with this. Some of us have to turn off our phones. Some of us have to delete our social media accounts. Some of us have to delete at least the social media apps from your phone. Some of you have to put internet filters on your computer. Some of you have to get real accountability on this stuff. If you go watch my goal setting training on my YouTube channel, at the end of it, I talk about true accountability, and I go through some of the main ways to get real accountability in your life, from social media, TV, internet addiction, bad habits, bad financial spending, Amazon addictions. I go through ways that you can cut those things right out of your life. And it's harsh, it's extreme, but some people need that. And so, myself included. And so I go in there, I give real examples of true accountability. You might want to check that out. Couponing, I've been down that road. Phone games, that'll kill you, man. That'll kill you. Oh yeah, these are good.
Yeah, one of my phone games right now, I'm at level 2,920. Yeah, I will admit I'm addicted.
And how much time are you spending searching for jobs, Illyria? You knew that was coming. Stop getting distracted on that stuff, you know?
Kristen,
like, you got things to do.
You guys have every right to shoot me on that one.
Put it down. Put it down. Step away from the phone. It's hard to do, but yeah, you got to prioritize. Like Thom is talking. It's the reason why Thom is talking about what he's talking about today, is because you guys have a mission, right? You guys got to find a job. Like that was the whole point of this grant, was for you guys to get placed in a job. And if you're spending hours a day on stuff that doesn't, give you productivity, then what was this all for? You know what I mean? So you got to learn, right, Thom? You got to learn to walk away from that stuff and prioritize. Like your priority isn't to be sitting on your phone playing games, right? And getting up to 200,000 points or whatever. Your priority is getting a job, because you got to pay the bills. You got to feed your kids. So I mean, all of us, I'm not just saying you, Illyria, but all of us, that's why I had Thom come in today, so you can kind of redirect so that you can be focused on what the ending goal was when you first started here. And that was to get a better job, to get a job, or to get a better job with your newfound skills. So go ahead, Thom, sorry.
And we're talking here about impulse control. I mean, and that's an issue of emotional intelligence, right? Like it's not like I used to be a video game addict. And back in the day, and I say back in the day, like it was, hopefully you're thinking it was in my 20s, but it wasn't that long ago. But my son now plays video games, right? He's about to be 10, and he wants to play with dad. And it's great. Like I love jumping on the computer at night and having a good, hour and a half session playing some games with him. It's fun. And it's quality time. He really appreciates that time. So that's good use of video games. So to say all video games are bad, I can't say that, right? For me, according to my priorities, family is really important. That's going to matter. Of course, if that's all I ever do with them, and I never take them for a walk or out to lunch or get to know them a little bit beyond video games, it's probably not too good, right? But so I can't say all video games are bad or that leisure is bad. But did I plan on doing leisure at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or did I plan on doing something else? And that's an issue of that motivation, back to emotional intelligence, and an impulse control issue. So again, our distractions are only distractions if it's a problem of impulse. Be careful not to label the thing as bad. The thing is amoral, right? Social media, whatever you think of it, take it or leave it. It can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. don't say it's all bad, right? There are people in my life I would not have a relationship with if it wasn't for social media. But am I jumping on social media at 2:00 in the afternoon when I should be doing homework? Well, when else am I going to do it? Like I said, plan it for Saturday morning, plan it for 8:00 at night. Then it's the impulse control. So where am I going with this? Time management is simply an issue of planning. We know that. It's an issue of planning priorities. It's an issue of allocating time to help alleviate impulse control. The best way to do that is not just saying, I got to get a bunch of crap done today, and then you're going to go and fight to do it. Instead, it's more about momentum. And the best way to do it, to keep yourself from getting thrown off the beam and grabbing impulses, is to give yourself margin. Never pack a day full. Never pack a day full. All right. And eventually you can get to the growth. So when you get out of time debt, how do you go further beyond what you're able to accomplish in 168 hours a week? John Haywood famously said it, many hands make light work. Multiplication is the ultimate goal there. Bill Gates only has 168 hours a week. Well, how does he accomplish Microsoft? Because he's got thousands of employees. But he couldn't get there himself out of time debt until he got a lot of money, until he leveraged money to buy time from other people. So eventually multiplication, but not until you have margin. Margin, then multiplication. Actually, some of the greatest CEOs I've ever worked with have more blank space on their calendar than anyone else in the company. They need to be free to be creative. All right. We now have 30 minutes for me to shut up and answer questions, for you guys to talk and share. Let's make sure we give people who haven't had a chance to share a chance to. What have you guys been taken away? Is there any way I can coach you? Is there something you go, I'm close based on what you said, but I'd like to get closer to it. We could do some group coaching. I am all yours for any questions, help, just to listen, whatever you'd like to talk about. We got 30 minutes to work through these things.
Real quick, you know how Jeff does the quadrant of what's important, unimportant, urgent, not urgent?
Yeah, that's from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey.
Is that where it is? Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm going to draw it for you.
Okay. And then if anybody has any questions for Thom, go ahead. But I wanted to see if he would talk a little bit about that.
This is Debbie. I have a question,
yeah, I know that was,
Thom. I love your types of time because I'm a D personality and I tend to make lists and pick off the smaller things because I can accomplish lots. But the bigger push down. What do you use to do your blocking your types of time? I mean, do you use a planner? What do you do? Or do you just have it in your head, or what do you physically?
No, never in my head.
What do you
emotional intelligence, resources, can't have anything in my head ever.
Okay.
That's like the whole emotional intelligence thing, is get everything out of your head. Never anything in your head, always be relaxed, never storing or holding something in memory. So I use 2 things, and this will work for a D personality. So I use Google Calendar, not Outlook, because Google Calendar allows you to have multiple calendars.
Okay.
At least in G Suite. I don't know if Gmail does, probably. I'll show you.
Calendars, yes.
And
you guys have had 4 Google classes that touched on Chrome, Mail, Calendar, and then like Google Drive and Docs. That's one of the ways where I stay organized too, is through my Google Calendar. And I block off time for stuff. Whenever I have an appointment, like yesterday leaving the dentist, reschedule, for whatever else I had to come back for. Immediately they wanted to give me a little card. I'm like, no, I'm going to lose that card. I got my phone. I'm going to tap on the calendar. I'm going to put it in my calendar right now. And then Google Calendar will give you reminders and things like that, so you don't forget. But the Google Calendar is a great way to stay organized.
What I love about it is it can be calendar overlays. So here you're looking at my my momentum blocks. So I don't have this mixed in with my appointments. I can go click my appointments up here and it'll overlay over that, but I can't have a calendar where I got 1,000 things I'm looking at. It'll cause me to go crazy. So if someone calls me up and they say, when do you have time on your calendar? Well, I can look at my appointments. I got lots of time on my calendar. This is a very free week for me. I'm on vacation this week, except for Kristen's, Kristen's special. But you look at my calendar, I don't have much on my calendar at all. That's the overlay.
See, I see that as being a lot. Looking at that, going, "Holy crap, he's got a lot on his calendar." I mean, I do too. I usually go the month view, but yeah, I do the same thing.
So that's nothing. That's a light week. So I go, but if someone said, "Okay, Thom, when can you come out and help us?" Okay, let's pretend it's not Thanksgiving on Thursday. Well, turn off this calendar, look at my appointments. Well, Thursday and Friday are wide open. That's dangerous. So I look at my optimization calendar. Hey, I'm doing sales from 12 to 3 on Friday. So really rather schedule you for Thursday. That's kind of how I use this.
Got it.
Okay.
So Deb, if you go back to the Google Classroom, you have all of those videos in there. You can go back to the calendar one.
Oh yeah.
And you can see how you can create multiple calendars and have them kind of overlay, turn them on, turn them off. And when I did that class, I talked about, if you got kids and stuff, you can create a calendar like, for your kids' schedule, like school stuff, field trips, Friday night dance or, half days. And so I never miss anything when it comes to Spencer stuff because I have it on my calendar. So, but you can create multiple calendars and then turn them on and turn them off as you need to see those appointments or create those appointments. So, yeah.
Okay.
So the first thing I use is the calendar overlay. The second thing I use is a paper to-do list. So I write down everything I got going on, anything I got to do on this list, and I check it off and I start it fresh every week. When I do planning, I use a whiteboard and I use a paper calendar for planning. But then all of that stuff translates to my electronic calendar. I'll set reminders on my phone. I'll tell Siri, just going to come on when I say it, to remind me of things. So if I need to be reminded, I'll say SIRI, remind me at 4:30 today to do this or that, and she will remind me. So I'm a little bit techie with that, but roll this up, put this in my back pocket, keep it with me all the time. My to-do list is always present. So I don't ever feel like a minute something comes my way, I put it down. And by the way, this all gets done in my admin time.
Yeah.
So I'm not like constantly going back to my to-do list, like, oh, let me get this done. Like it's admin time. I don't look at it except during admin time.
Okay. So the things
it's really simple
on your to-do list are on there, but then as you do get them scheduled, they go into your calendar depending on which it is.
I never put the things on my calendar. I have admin time.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that because I can't put on my calendar from 2 to 3, I'm going to work on project X. I can't work that way because that's not momentum. I have to have momentum. Exclusion of everything else, focus on one thing. So admin time, I don't answer my phone. Okay. I don't look at my email. I don't do anything. No social media. One at a time.
Okay.
So the question at the beginning of the week is how much admin time will I need this week? And I go ahead and block that out. This actually is a way of using procrastination positively. I'm procrastinating for my admin time.
Yeah. Okay.
So for those of you that are not graduated yet and are still got another month or two of class, then, you can use that Google Calendar to block out your time that you're in class, and then to block out time for your homework, for strategizing with Camille, getting, your one-on-one time with her, and then whatever homework she gives you from your sessions. Utilize this time management for that, because, I get a lot of students that are like, can't make it to class, right? So whether it's one day or whether they're doing the whole course through the videos, they fall off. And then a week goes by, and then 2 weeks go by, and they didn't look at any of the videos, and they know they've got, about 15 hours a week in classroom time, and then another about 10 hours a week with homework and, job stuff, resume stuff, whatever. And it just seems to not ever get done. And then they get backed up 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks. And it's like, and then we send out the homework reminders, and then that's when panic and anxiety sets in. And it's like, oh my God. And then my phone starts blowing up the night before homework is due. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to get it done. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry to me. At the end of the day, you guys, you got to figure it out, right? Which is why we're doing this time management class. Is you got to find a way to prioritize and figure out what's important to you. What I tell you at the beginning of the course is my focus is on my students right now, the ones I have in class right now. So the ones that graduated yesterday, you guys are spreading your wings and flying. We've given you all the tools, the education, everything you need. Not to say we won't be there, we will. But my focus, my priority is on the students now. And so get me while you got me, which is right now. When you're in class with me right now, or you're in that 3-month program, that's the time we're going to focus on you. So you focus on us, right? You focus on what you need to do. And so, that's why we need you to do that. And that's why I think the time management piece of today was really important for you guys to really set your priorities, set the time aside, try not to get distracted. And I think that's the biggest thing is everybody's getting distracted. I totally get it. I do too. But when this is done and you graduate, it's time for you to move on and start focus on getting a job and things like that. It's not time to get one-on-one with Mike on how to do something in Excel. Go back and view the videos. They're there for you. They'll always be there for you. But when a student needs one-on-one time with us, it's the students that are in class now that are just learning this stuff and not understanding it now. And if you're a month behind and then a month later, you're like, can you give me some one-on-one time with Excel? I'm like, didn't you take Excel like a month ago? Like, where have you been? So just understand that and utilize your time wisely. Go ahead, Thom.
If I can jump in there, I'm not disagreeing with Kristen, but I will say one thing. We have a tendency to kind of say things that make things norms that shouldn't be norms. So like Kristen said, I don't understand you get distracted. I get distracted too. Yes, right? Like that's normal. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I would just reword it to distractions are normal, but it's a disease. So what I mean by that is not that like disease is normal. Like people get sick and people die. Like that's normal, but we're still going to fight against it. We're still going to take precautions. So what I like to say is distractions are coming, like the flu virus is coming. I'm going to put on a mask. To me, impulsivity is a disease state. If I'm being impulsive, like distractions are going to come. I know the germs are coming, but I'm going to mask up. My impulsivity means I caught it, right? Like if I respond to distractions, that's the disease. And so I rewrite the narrative in my head, right? Like, and being impulsive is totally normal for sick people. I don't want to be sick. I am sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. No more impulsivity. So I keep that mindset all the time of like, if I'm reactive all day, it's a problem. So at the end of the day with my inventory, how reactive was I today? Very reactive. Okay, why? Don't get upset. Don't get triggered. It's information for me to make changes for tomorrow and try again. That's all. I don't want to get upset and frustrated that I was impulsive. I just want to get better. And, and I can't get better if I don't find out why. And so I just over time just removed so much impulsivity. Now there's a danger in that. There's always ditches on either side of the road. So I've become less reactive, tremendously less reactive. I think I'm probably one of the least reactive people as things come in compared to where I once was. But I've also fallen into the other ditch before, which is where like I say no to everything, right? Like I'm working at home now. And so, and I did it earlier. I was on break, ran out to use the restroom. I'm coming back in, my daughter comes up, right? Daddy, can I tell you something? I got to get back on a call. Hyper-focused. And then I see her face and I'm like, I'm sorry. What is it? Why? Because she's more important than you guys. right? That moment mattered. What I told her was this mattered more. This is important. And in a sense, this matters more, as in this is what I planned. But I have to be careful. How much do I rearrange my priorities and my prioritization? How much do I reroute my priorities in my I'm not allowing distractions anymore narrative? So it's a balance, right? So to me, impulsivity is a disease. Even though I'm highly impulsive, impulsivity is a disease. At the same time, I'm not being impulsive so I can focus on my priorities. I get to a place where I push out everything else in the world, but this, then work is priority. I have to balance that. Again, that D personality, some people are different. Some people need to focus more on things for themselves. I don't have that problem. Selfishness comes naturally to me. So supportiveness does not. So I've had to work on that because my priorities are not self, right? My priorities are them. So with that, let me share one other thing with you. It's very, very important in time management. Probably the most important thing you could ever learn in time management is something called the Parkinson's principle. Parkinson's principle is greater than the time quadrants of Stephen Covey, in that Parkinson's principle is this principle. And if you want to learn more about that, just Google it. It's not Parkinson's disease. It's not the same Parkinson. There's actually a great book called Profit First. If you go watch this guy who wrote the book Profit First, Michael something, if you go watch his Google Talks, they're really good. And all he does is talk about Parkinson's principle. Parkinson's principle is the idea of small plates. So we spend all this time trying to control our impulses, right? All this time saying, I should eat less, I should eat less, I should eat less. Well, Parkinson's principle is the idea that you're fighting the uphill battle. You're trying to stem the tide. It's easier to flow with it. So eat all you want, use smaller plates. Fill that plate all you want. The idea of Parkinson's principle is that the mind will naturally maximize all resources given. So remember back in the day when you could live on, say, $100 a week, whatever, and you maximize that, and now you're like, I can't imagine living on less than $1,000 or whatever it is. I don't want to. That's everybody's problem. Trust me, I coach people that make ridiculous amounts of money, and they're like, I don't know how you live on that. Parkinson's principle. We maximize our resources based on what we're given. And so if you only had a plate this big in your house, it's eventually going to become a balanced plate. At first it won't be, but in time it does. And that's the idea. This is procrastination. How is it you can wait till the last hour and get so much done? Parkinson's principle. So then the challenge or the opportunity becomes, how can I turn every hour into Parkinson's principle? How can I turn everything into that? How can I maximize resources and everything? How can I force myself? It has to be forced. This is why companies realize this is why they put employees in overwhelm, because they're like, they don't need more time. We don't need to hire more people. They'll get it done. Parkinson's principle. They're actually right. Eventually they burn them out. We need rest. So what this time blocking has in mind is give yourself 2 or 3 hours to get this thing done with no distractions. Parkinson's principle says you'll use your creativity faster, get it done, but then you have to give yourself rest to recharge. You have to be real with yourself. Give yourself rest. Parkinson's, rest. That's how it works. Definitely go check it out if you're into this stuff. I have found, man, that is so true. That is so true. You can have such a productive 10 minutes of exercise. It would blow your mind what you can do in 10 minutes of exercise. If you only give yourself 10 minutes to exercise a day, after a week or two, that 10 minutes is going to become really productive. And so it's just an example of that. So, all right, we got time for more questions. Maybe someone who hasn't had a chance yet. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to ask if anybody knew of Fly Lady. She actually does. It's basically like a housekeeping book, but her thing is if you have a timer, and I've actually done it, but I haven't kept up with it. That's my problem, is continuity with me. It's really bad that my initials actually fit my symptom, ADD. But literally, her thing was, if you take a timer and you set it for 15 minutes and you only, let's just say you want to pick up a hot spot, a place where you keep setting things down or making a big mess. And you clean up you take 15 minutes to clean up that spot, but you set a timer to take 15 minutes to clean up that spot. You're talking about blocking out time. She is too, just smaller amounts. And using a timer to keep it so that you're actually kind of keeping up with that. I don't know if that works.
It depends on your personality with that. So I had an employee one time that was able to do that really well. He was just so bad at the ADD. I mean, one of the worst I've ever seen, that he could only focus on anything for 15 minutes at a time. So he forced himself to 15 minutes and he'd start getting the itch about 10 and he'd let the timer go off and then he'd focus on something else or that same thing again, but he'd still reset. He'd stand up, he'd spin around, he'd sit back down, and he'd work for another 15 minutes. And so that worked for him. I find the 15 minutes to be a distraction. I prefer a larger time block of focus because remember, focus is what machines can't do. When you're focused, your brain engages creativity over a long period of time. So like, if you go and work on something for just 15 minutes, all you can do is manual labor. But if you worked on it for 15 hours exclusively, you could invent something. And so I try to give myself all day to work on something that requires focus and creativity, because when the momentum kicks in, you're more efficient, more productive than you would have been in multitasking, is my point. So I think for ADD, the 15-minute timer works. For those of you who just need more focus, that aren't suffering from that ADD to that level, then try the time blocking with the exclusion of everything else. Turning off social media, turning off your phone, turning off the radio, just putting on some classical music, some jazz, jump in and just work exclusively on one project for 2 hours. 2 hours. And about an hour in, all of a sudden it's like, whew, you're on a momentum, ramping up, snowballing. But if you can't do that, like physically impossible for you, then the 15-minute thing is better than nothing. So one of the things that we haven't gone back to is some of the emotional intelligence stuff. We can talk about that a little bit. We've got another 10, 15 minutes here for anyone else. If you haven't had a chance to jump in, you can put your questions in the chat. I'm missing questions. Patricia said, any advice for someone with test anxiety? You know, the biggest problem with test anxiety is that the anxiety removes our ability to be rational. We don't think clearly, we overthink. We're so nervous we forget. And it's really a problem. It really is a problem for people that have to take a lot of tests. It's a real thing. I very, very quick. These are really simple and they're not full-on solutions. There's probably better solutions out there than what I would say. But the two things I've seen help people that I've worked with is to take the test multiple times. So like, for example, I have a friend who's getting ready to take the real estate exam. And I told him, go fail it the first time. He goes, what? I'm like, well, you're studying like crazy. You're so nervous. Go fail it. Take it twice. The first time, I just want you to go get in the game. It's like throwing a kid in the pool, let him splash around a little bit before you teach him to swim, right? So that's one thing. That's immersion therapy. It works sometimes. And by the way, they're more likely to pass it on their first time than their second time because they already planned a second one. So that's kind of the thing. You plan to fail, and then you'll get into on the anxiety. The other thing with test anxiety is to accept. It's all about accepting the outcome, right? We tend to place more priority on something than is necessary. Like, if I fail this test, it's okay. If I don't qualify for this or that, it is okay. And so, you know, I just believe in kind of accepting whatever comes your way. Now, I've got other techniques I use for that, but anything that happens to me is okay. It's okay. I'm in danger of getting on a spiritual soapbox with that, so I'll just leave that there. I've helped a lot of people with anxiety, and what I have found is it's more of a knowing that things are okay when they're not okay is, I think, more important. It's not surrender to win or anything like that. It's got similarities, but you know, recognizing your own limited control is one of the best, at least what I've found is recognizing my own limited control and not coveting more control is probably one of the best ways to not be anxious. But anyway, it's a lot of a deeper. I don't think there's any perfect cure for anxiety within man himself. So I'll just leave it at that. So let's see. Holly says that's Buddhism. Well, no, Buddhism would see it. Similarities. It's spiritual. We're talking biology today and practicality. So I'll leave my spiritual lectures for a different time. I want Kristen to welcome me back. What other questions you guys got? This is good. You're probably like, when can we stop listening to Thom? It's been 4 hours of Thom. That's enough. I mean, I can't hear myself talk much more. So what's Samantha think? Samantha has an extra consonant in her name. It's Sam-mantha, which I appreciate because, as you can see, Thom is with an H, T-H-O-M. It's a known fact that people with additional consonants in their name are more successful in life.
There you go, Sam.
Is that true?
Nope.
All right,
That's why I gave you the extra
I'm gonna
L.
run with it anyway.
Run with it. I am.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
You can go with that.
And studies, 95% of studies have shown that people with additional consonants in their name are more likely to be successful. And of course, 86% of all statistics are made up on the spot.
Sounds all right.
These are dad jokes.
Thom, can you recommend any books, any good reads for emotional intelligence and time management for the students?
Yeah, for sure. So, and if you don't like to read or you want to get excited about reading and you can't, I always recommend go watch the person's speech first, because authors will take like an hour of quality material and blow it out into a book. So if you just want the hour of material, whenever they have to go speak on their book, that's usually what they give you. So, so I like to always go watch their talk first, right? So like on Profit First, go watch his talks and then go read the book. So best thing for time management or for emotional intelligence, best thing for emotional intelligence is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. That's the best book. Anything by Bradbury, Travis Bradbury, is the best. The guy who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, of course he didn't come up with it, came up with way before him, but is Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence. He also wrote the book Working with Emotional Intelligence, which is very good for emotional intelligence in the workplace. But those are cerebral, man. Those are like reading college textbooks. His talks on it are great. Speaking of Buddhism, he converted to Buddhism. But his stuff is kind of science plus Buddhism, where Bradbury is just really like practical. I just find like he's an easy read. He's a great speaker. So just go watch his speeches. He's amazing. I love that dude. Actually, we've got some local coaches that are really good. Robin Lavitch is a local lady. She does coaching. Her stuff on emotional intelligence, some of the best I've ever heard. She lives right here in Clearwater. Robin Lavitch. I don't know if you know her, Kristen. Definitely someone you'd want to connect with. Go check out her YouTube or whatever. I think she's got a YouTube. So that's emotional intelligence. The book Mini Habits has probably been the most impactful in my life when it comes to motivation and emotional intelligence. Mini Habits. I forget the guy's name who wrote it. Mini Habits. Atomic Habits is another good one. Some people like Atomic Habits more than Mini Habits. I like Mini Habits. There's some stuff out there like the 30-day year, I think it's called, or something like that. Uses Parkinson's principle. It's pretty cool. On time management, I think it's called the 30-day year. Forget. Time management, everyone should read 7 Habits to Highly Effective People. So every book that I'm mentioning is just borrowing from his books. So Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's probably his time blocking method. His time method is the best. Best time management principle, which I totally stole, by the way, and reused today, is from Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach. So he's the one that came up with the momentum blocks. He does them as days. So he has 3 types of days. He does a buffer, focus, and free days. So buffer is your admin, planning. Focus is work, and free is just nothing. So he uses buffer, focus, free. So I took my 4 blocks built off of his 3. So Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, his YouTube channel, will become a distraction for you. It's really good. He's like the coach of coaches. Every coach out there is stealing from Dan Sullivan, or they're stealing from someone who stole from Dan Sullivan. If you want to go start your own consulting business, just go become an expert on Dan Sullivan and just go repeat what he says, make it your own, and welcome to my world. He really is the man. You can also join Strategic Coach. I think it's currently $12,000 a year for 4 meetings. Jeff used to be a member of Strategic Coach, just so you know, Kristen. I've got 5 clients in Strategic Coach right now. So I actually do. So I'll send my clients to Strategic Coach 4 times a year, and then I'll just help coach them throughout the year on what they learned at Coach.
Mm-hmm.
So like my goal setting, it comes out of his strategy circle. I think I've adapted and done it better, to be fair, but I was built on his foundation.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Not everything I come up with.
So Luke, I think Luke, if this was a question, how to turn your brain off after waking up, between 2 and 4 a.m. This is my problem. It happens to me pretty much every night, maybe a couple nights a week at least, every other night.
It depends on what the thoughts are. So it's a good question. So for example, I woke up at 1:30 in the morning on last week, and I had a speech I had to give on Sunday. And I was thinking about it, and I was getting really good ideas. So I woke up and wrote them down. I didn't turn it off.
Okay.
But if I woke up and I'm anxious, and I need to turn them off, then that's different. So I don't know I would want to turn them off. By the way, the reason why you have such great thoughts at 2 o'clock in the morning is simply because of what we're talking about here. No distractions. You're thinking exclusively, you're thinking creatively, and without distraction. And so my goal for you is to create that during your day when you're not supposed to be sleeping.
Okay. So for me,
that's really
thinking about things I can't control. That's my problem.
Worry.
Like thinking about Dan and how I can help him. And, I can't imagine putting him back on the streets, and then I would feel responsible and, like trying to, control things I can't, because it depends on other people, so
that's worry.
Yeah, that's worry. Yeah, exactly.
So accept the lack of control, accept the outcomes. Again, so I have nothing but a spiritual response to that one.
Okay. Yeah, for me, Luke, I just breathe. I just I have that self-awareness, and I just stop, and I just close my eyes, and I just breathe really heavy and just say, get out of my head, get out of my head, get out of my head. Eventually it works, but sometimes they have some really great apps on, like they have a really great, when you get in a massage, like the music they play, like the trees and the rain and the birds chirping or whatever. They have really great apps for, different noises and things like that. Insight timer app, Katie just put that in there. That might be a good one. To drown out the outside noise, especially now that we have our windows open at night. Sometimes just have a fan in your room, or the fan app. There's actually an app that it's like when you turn it on, it sounds like a fan. So I know for me, I don't care how cold it gets in the dead of winter in New England, I would always have a fan on still. So just drown out the outside noise and stuff like that. So
reading a book has always knocked me out. That's not the same as reading news or social media. Don't pick up your phone at all. So if you don't pick up your phone and you pick up a book, you'll probably be out in a page. But I don't know. So one of the things I do, I don't know if this works, I just remember it, is like when I'm having a hard time falling back asleep, like I just changed where I sleep. So my wife always like, why did you get up at 1:30 in the morning and go to the couch? I just wasn't having restful sleep. I went into the couch and I was zonked out really well. So sometimes for me, I just have to change my place I sleep. So I either sleep in the bed or I sleep on the couch, and I just go back and forth, not because I'm in any trouble. But I sleep, I'll change locations. That always works for me. But if I go out there and my mind is still focused on something, especially if it's good ideas, I capture it.
Come on, admit it. There are definitely times because you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. She would make me sleep on the couch because I was in trouble. That's not how she punishes me.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
All right,
that would be a
guys,
punishment for
any
her.
more questions from anybody?
Actually, I kind of had a comment for Luke. This might seem quite childish, but it's actually worked for me. If you take a stuffed animal with a scent that you really like and you spray that scent on the stuffed animal and then cuddle that, sometimes it calms you down. I've actually done that. It seems childish, but it works.
All right, anybody else? Any questions? All right. So I highly recommend you guys connect with Thom on social media. Thom is going to give me the presentations, his PowerPoint presentations that he was showing. I will upload those along with today's video to the Resume Building Google Classroom under the classwork tab at the top. Scroll down to professional development, and eventually later on today, you'll see all that stuff in there for future use. Highly recommend connecting with him on social media. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, Stronghold Training, and then Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, all the social media sites. Thom is there, so yeah.
You guys have been great. I've enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Thank
Anyone
you
that
so
can
much,
sit and
Thom,
listen
so
to me for
much.
4 hours, I appreciate it. Anyone who can sit and listen to me for 4 hours, I love you. Just so you know, anyone.
Thanks,
Amazing.
Kristen, too.
Thank you.
You're welcome, you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving, and reach out to
Bye.
me if you need me. I got a new group starting on Monday. I know a lot of you are graduates, but you know, if you need anything, you know how to find us. Bye, Sam.
Thank you, guys.
Bye,
Enjoy.
Tom. Nice to see you.
Bye.
All right, bye, you
Happy
guys.
Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.